A warm welcome to everyone here, distinguished speakers, and of course the audience. My name is Kavan Ramesh, and I'm a student coordinator, research coordinator for GCTC. I'd like to welcome you
Please
all.
make it full screen.
Oh, sure. Is it full screen now? Hello? Hello?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's taking some time. My bad. Okay, should be done.
You can continue.
Great. So we shall start with the speakers from India first. So it's my honor to introduce the speakers here. So we'll start with Ashwin B. Pandya, sir. Shri A.B. Pandya of CWC, which is the Central Water Commission, and ex officio secretary to the Government of India, Ministry of Water Resources, River Development, and Ganga Rejuvenation. Presently, he's engaged with the governments of Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, and Odisha, with WAPCOS and the World Bank for various hydropower projects, including others that involve design reviews and construction guidance, such as the Polavaram project. He's also the chairman of Design Review Panel and Consultancy to the World Bank for the National Hydrology Project in India and Dam Safety Advice in Nigeria. He has been awarded by the Central Board of Irrigation and Power, Delhi chapter of Indian Geotechnical Society, and 5 other professional bodies for his distinguished performance and lifetime achievements. Sri A.B. Pandya, sir, in his long distinguished service, encompassing all aspects of water resources sector, has provided mentorship and has led the large water resources engineering community towards a sustainable and rational development regime in the sector. Thank you, sir, for being here. Then we have Sharat Sabha, sir. Mr. Sharat Sabha, sir, joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1975 after serving in various positions in the permanent mission of India to the UN in Geneva and the Indian missions in Madagascar, France, and Mauritius. He was the Director Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi from 1990 to 1995. The positions held by him subsequently have been Deputy High Commissioner of India in Pakistan from 1995 to 99, the Deputy Permanent Representative of India to the UN in Geneva, that is 1999 to 2002, the Ambassador of India to Uzbekistan from 2002 to 2005, an additional secretary, special secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, September 2005 to March 2009. Mr. Sabharwal was High Commissioner of India to Pakistan from April 2009 to June 2013. He was appointed Central Information Commissioner in November 2013 and has served in this position till September 2017. Mr. Sabharwal has been Deputy Leader and member of the Indian delegations to the United Nations General Assembly, the erstwhile UN Commission on Human Rights, the International Labour Conference, and World Health Assembly. Thank you, sir. Then we have Lieutenant General Gurmeet Singh. Lieutenant General Gurmeet Singh, sir, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, and VSM, was superannuated as Deputy Chief of Army Staff after nearly 40 years of service. He has distinctively held 2 PSO appointments, that is, the Adjutant General and Deputy COAS. He has been Brigade Commander, BGS, and Corps Commander on the Jhelum River. He had served 2 tenures in Military Operations Directorate as Director and Additional DGMO. Lieutenant General Gurmeet Singh, sir, visited Pakistan twice, once as a Major General for the Siachen and then the CBM talks. He was the General Officer commanding Counterinsurgency Force Delta on Chenab River. Currently, he is a Distinguished Fellow at Center for Land Warfare Center and an Adjunct Fellow with the Institution of Chinese Studies. You have also seen him as a defense expert on TV and seminar discussions. Thank you for your service, sir, and thank you for being here. Then we have Dr. D.V. Thareja, sir. Dr. D.V. Thareja was the former commissioner for the Indus and Ministry of Water Resources and was an active participant in the process of blacklisting a firm that advised the government of India with regards to Pakistan. He's the former chairman of the GFCC and is a well-known civil designer. He served as the Chief Design Officer of the Central Water Commission, that's the CWC, and is specialized in the hydropower and irrigation projects. Sir was involved in civil design for about 35 years, showing the large experience he has. Dr. D.V. Thareja sir is also the SNC Lavalin Limited and has even served as the chairman of the Ganga Flood Control Commission. Thank you for being here, sir. And we have now Sanjay Gupta, sir. With over 2 decades of senior level experience in strategy advice and policy advocacy, covering the areas of regional cooperation in water resource management, water and sanitation, environment, climate change, gender, and livelihoods all across South Asia, Central Asia, Europe, and the US of A. Mr. Sanjay Gupta has worked for the World Bank, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Asian Development Bank, and the United States House of Representatives, Malmo University, international NGOs, and the private sector. He has also been a member of the Trek 2 dialogue on the Indus River cooperation between India and Pakistan. Mr. Sanjay has a master's degree in communication for development from Malmo University, Sweden, a Master for Science in Marine Environmental Sciences from the University at Stony Brook, New York, USA, and a BSc Honors in Physics from St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi, India. And with that, I thank you all for being here. And now my colleague and fellow student research coordinator, Tanveer Kaur, will introduce the distinguished guests and speakers from Pakistan. Thank you.
Everyone, this is Tanveer Kaur this side, and I'm a research coordinator in GCTC. And just give me a second, I'm here to present the screen. So is it visible?
Can't hear you properly, Sanjeev.
So is my screen visible?
Yeah, okay. Please be louder. Right.
Yes, sir. Just give me a second. So is the presentation visible to you? Hello?
It's not visible. Not visible.
Tanveer, go back to the window, the Adobe window that you had opened.
Okay. Is it visible now?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We are honored to have with us Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi. We welcome you, sir.
Please be louder.
Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi was commissioned in the Army on October 27, 1974. He served in the various command assignments as a commander, engineer, DOC, and corps commander. He also served in staff as Deputy Engineer in Chief and Director General Staff duties at GHQ. After graduating from the Military College of Engineering, Command and Staff College, Quetta, and National Defense University, remained on the faculty of the three prestigious institutions. General Lodi holds a master's degree.
Sir, Bolun sir, good evening. Bolun sir.
General Lodi holds a master's degree in international relations. He also attended finance-related short courses at Columbia University, USA, and INSEAD, France. General Lodi served as Secretary Defense for a short tenure and later served as a successful CEO and MD of a leading corporate organization. He was also appointed as a defense minister in an interim sitter. He is presently a freelance writer and an eminent defense analyst. We are honored to have you with us, sir. We also have with us Ambassador Abdul Basit. Ambassador Abdul Basit sir is a retired Pakistani diplomat who previously served as a High Commissioner to Pakistan, of Pakistan to India. He was appointed so back in 2014 and now has been based in Pakistani High Commission in New Delhi. He served as the ambassador to Germany and as the Foreign Office spokesperson as well. He played a crucial role in Pakistan's missions in multiple countries, which
Can
include...
we please change the slide?
Oh, sorry, sir. I'm really sorry for the technical glitch.
Go on, go on.
Ambassador Abdul Basit sir has played a crucial role in Pakistan's missions in multiple countries, which include Germany, Switzerland, USA, and United Kingdom. We are honored to have you with us, sir. We also have with us Mr. Javed Majid sir. Mr. Javed Majid sir is a Pakistani diplomat, academically trained in defense studies. He qualified for the public administration services in Pakistan and has served in various positions such as Secretary of Forest, Secretary of Industries and Irrigation and Power. He has also served as the Joint Secretary of Ministry of Kashmir Affairs in Northern Areas, Program Manager of a Primary Education Program, Additional Secretary, Social Action Program, amongst the others. Mr. Majid is well-versed with various aspects of administration, treaties, and agreements between India and Pakistan because of his experience in the same. Thank you for being with us, sir. Our session chair for today is Dr. Uttam Kumar Sinha, sir. Dr. Uttam Kumar Sinha is currently a senior fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library and the Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. His areas of research include transboundary water issues, climate change, and Arctic region. Dr. Sinha also has a doctorate in international politics from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Dr. Sinha is currently on the Technical Advisory Board of the South Asia Water Governance Program, along with the Policy Advisory role at the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development in Kathmandu. He is also engaged in Track 2 dialogue process and was India's representative to the CSCAP Working Group on Water Resources. He even chaired the Working Group on Water Dispute Resolution Mechanism of the Strategic Studies Network, National Defense University, Washington, D.C. He will be the session chair of the panel discussion, and he's also coming up with his book on history of Indus water, which marks 60 years of this treaty, which will come out in December and is about to be published, which will be published by the Penguin Random House. I would also request both the audience and speakers to refrain from making any unpleasant remarks, as this is to be a civil panel discussion to exchange the views and enlighten us all. We welcome everyone.
I would proceed with General Naeem Lodhi, sir. General Naeem Lodhi, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you very much, GCTC and the DS Hub and your team for affording us this opportunity. I think this is a great thing to be done. If such interactions can take place between people and between various think tanks, probably the two countries become much nearer and many misgivings can be removed. So I think we should continue with that. We all understand that we cannot afford to keep our people under perpetual fear and tense environment, diverting our meager resources towards security-related expenditures, impacting negatively on socioeconomic factors. Do the people or leadership of this subcontinent lack the acumen or the intellect to resolve the issues ourselves? I don't think so. I think we are good enough. We have the best of the doctors and engineers and economic people. So why can't we have, such political brains where we can resolve our issues? I intend remaining at conceptual level while discussing Indus Water Treaty 1960. That brought out few strengths of the two countries. If given appropriate environment and external support, we can resolve our issues, that has been demonstrated. Starting from 1947 onward, we kept behaving like antagonized neighbors, but kept managing our issues till 65. Agreeing to UN resolutions on Kashmir, Indus Water Treaty, run of Kutch, even 65 ceasefire. So we always managed it. With the passage of time, our disputes kept multiplying rather than shrinking afterwards. Siachen and Sir Creek were not very difficult things to resolve, and present edition of terrorism allegation is also going on. So coming back to Indus Water Treaty, in spite of reservations on both sides, the treaty was signed and is holding on till today in spite of so many ups and downs. Who gained and who lost should not be a subject of discussion, I think, anymore. Treaty has survived wars and tense periods. Recent threatening tones do not augur well for the future of the two nuclear neighbors. Actually, we should build on the basis foundation of this treaty and move forward to resolve all our outstanding disputes. Some quarters in both countries find the Indus Water Treaty unjust from their own point of view. It also gets reflected in the discussion note issued for today's event. The dispute resolution mechanism provided within the treaty has worked so far and quite well. Basically, it has been seen again and again that most of the things were technical in nature and could always be resolved. Indus Water commissioners have been meeting quite regularly, and just yesterday and day before they were meeting again, which is a great thing to see. Some apprehensions expressed by certain Pakistani scholars, and I do not debate on their merit, but I will just bring out that what various people think about it. One thinking is that instead of distributing waters, we distributed the rivers. Probably, the international norm is that water of each water course should be divided according to the length of that water course or whatever it is. That could have been done anyway. That is behind us now. People also think that the environmental impacts of certain rivers going totally dry were not foreseen then, because in those days, environment was not such an in thing. India has constructed a number of dams and acquired the capability of manipulating. Just I'm talking about the capability of manipulating the water flows that can adversely affect the economic and the defense of Pakistan. Indus rivers tributaries mostly emanate, I'm talking about the Indus River per se, tributaries mostly emanate from Himalayan glaciers, should not have been a part of the treaty. Once we say that only 30% water has been given to India and the rest 70% or more has been taken away from Pakistan, we should also keep in mind that the main river, which is Indus itself, which comprises of Cunard River and Kabul River and Swat River, none of these tributaries, they actually flow from India. So this water could have been kept separate. As India was allowed historic and domestic uses of western rivers, we as Pakistan should also have been allowed the same uses in the eastern rivers. The point is self-explanatory that if, of course, we understand that as far as non-consumptive use of making electricity, etc., that couldn't have come to us. But domestic use and historic use of agriculture, which was afforded to India on the western rivers, was not afforded to Pakistan in the eastern rivers. And India, being the upper riparian, has an advantage and can actually execute the threats that are heard nowadays. If this treaty gets abrogated for whatever reason, it will further vitiate the already deteriorating relations between the two neighbors. India, being a bigger country, should exhibit larger capacity to remove the prevailing mistrust. That is what we think. If we go through the history of relations between India and Pakistan, certain thoughts crossed my mind that I would like to share. Great Britain deliberately left some unresolved issues in this region so that they can keep controlling the subcontinent. Bigger powers, especially the net exporters of military hardware, would never like to see complete peace in the region for obvious reasons. If we could resolve water issue, run of Kutch, etc., Siachen and Silk Creek could be easily resolved. Only stumbling block would be Kashmir, which we can tackle later. Unfortunately, we the two countries have never been able to resolve our matters bilaterally. So the mantra must rest. We would require outside facilitation whether we like it or not. As long as we remain locked in an adversarial mode, the people will keep suffering in socio-economic aspects. So my concluding remarks are that let us abide by the treaties and resolutions that we have already signed and move forward in resolving outstanding issues. That requires an environment of trust, and both sides need to undertake certain concrete steps to build that. India, being a larger country, should take initiative. You will not find us wanting in reciprocation. There are groups out there who proclaim that the blacks and browns have lower intellect and they can't manage their issues. Let us prove them wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Lodi. You actually stick to the time, so thanks. You started with the bang. I would now request Engineer Ashwin B. Pandya from India.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sinha and General Lodi for setting the tone. And I will start with the basic background of Indus Treaty. Indus Treaty is a unique treaty in the world. It is the first treaty which has got so detailed engineering, planning, and water resources planning information and requirements built into it compared to any other treaty in the world. The amount of details that have been gone into while drafting the treaty are something phenomenal. It has not been witnessed in other places and in other areas. We have, like in the case of Indus, it's a largest basin, and the entire subcontinent is being known with its name, Indus, Indo-Gangetic Plain. That is the place where the entire Indian civilization started. The basin area is about 1.2 million square kilometers, out of which in India it's about 0.32 million square kilometers is there, and mean annual flow at Kalabag in Pakistan is somewhere around 168 million acre feet or 207 billion cubic meters. The treaty is unique in the way that even though there were attempts made to start with a integrated development, which was made by the chairman of TVA and other experts at that point of time, because of the differences, the resolution of the differences required that exclusive allocation and exclusive management of water resources be provided to each of the parties, and that led to the division of rivers like Satluj, Beas, and Ravi, which are being treated as eastern rivers, and then the Chenab, Jhelum, and Indus, which are being called as western rivers, go into the hands of management of these rivers, go into the purview of individual countries. Indus Treaty, even though it is called Indus Treaty, is basically the Indus Treaty part of the India-Pakistan common rivers, because the rivers like Kabul, Swat, and other tributaries, which are entirely originating in Pakistan and Afghanistan area and joining Indus in a later place, are not really finding any mention or any consideration over here. The contribution of the rivers in million acre feet is that in case of Pakistan, the Indus main has about 90 million acre feet of flow. Chenab has 23 million acre feet, and Jhelum on an average is 23 million acre feet, which almost aggregates to 136 million acre feet for Pakistan. Whereas in case of India, the Satluj is about 13.5 million acre feet, Beas is 127, and Ravi is 6.4, and that aggregates to 32.6 million acre feet. Sorry, in case of Beas, it is 12.7. So as we can see, the entire treaty has been very, very generous. It has been done in a very give and take kind of spirit. And the treaty was signed after 8 years of negotiations. There were 8 years of prolonged negotiations in which the engineers from both the parties took part. In fact, I'm proud to say that the first Secretary General of ICID, to whom I am representing presently as Secretary General, the first Secretary General of ICID, that is Mr. N.D. Gulati, was the chief architect of the Indus Treaty when it took place in 1960. And then later on, he continued to play a very great part. And very eminent water resources engineers from India, like Dr. A. N. Khosla and others, they participated in drafting of this treaty and in negotiation of this treaty. So the treaty has got such a strong sign of the engineering planning and the water resources planning that is there. Essentially, the treaty talks about the consumptive rights of the individual rivers. The consumptive rights for irrigation are for the eastern rivers, they are given to the country of India, wherein in case of the western rivers, the consumptive rights to India are limited to somewhere around 13.43 lakh acres or 0.54 million hectares, and the storage for supporting this irrigation up to 3.6 million acre feet. The delivery of waters of western rivers is not assured in a fixed quantitative terms because this is a natural phenomenon. In case of water resources, we all understand that the supply is always random because the rainfall is a very random process, and because of the climatic phenomena that happens at different points of time, whatever water comes in western rivers is supposed to be delivered to Pakistan, and whatever water that comes in the eastern rivers is required to be used by India in the manner that it occurs. There can be no further regulation on that manner because that's a part of the nature. Another very important thing is that in this treaty, it's a permanent treaty. There is no exit clause or modification clause that is put into the treaty. The treaty has been fixed as a decree, and no territorial issues are to be raised as a part of this treaty. There is a very elaborate mechanism of dispute resolution, a very specific mechanism. In fact, a few annexures are wholly devoted to the dispute resolution mechanism because the founding fathers actually knew that there will be differences of opinion when we will talk about the matters which are technical in nature, which are scientific in nature, and it will be necessary for the world community or for the expert community to resolve this in a mutually amicable manner. So that's it, and for that we have got the Permanent Index Commission, and then Permanent Index Commissions can report those disputes to the individual governments, and then after the individual governments are not able to resolve the issues, then there are mechanisms of neutral expert or the court of arbitration as required and as appointed or as mediated by the World Bank. However, the World Bank did play a very crucial part in formulating the treaty, but then when it comes to the dispute resolution, the World Bank role is limited to providing the services of or identifying and providing the services of the neutral expert or setting up of the court of arbitration, and then onwards whatever activities are to be done, that is to be done by the two parties and the neutral experts. The protocol for exchange of information are also very elaborate. We have got protocols of information of exchange of hydrological data about the flows that are occurring in various areas, the floods that are likely to occur. In fact, the floods are very important part when it comes to the exchange of data, because being the upstream country, we have a prior knowledge of how much amount of flood that is likely to occur, and then because of that, how much amount of what kind of issues or disaster management areas that will have to be taken up in Pakistan. And for that, routinely the data is provided, especially during the monsoon season. The situation regarding consumptive use is something where a lot of thinking and lot of concerns have evolved. The primary issue is that if we can see the water use allocation, then we find that India has actually got 32.6 million acre feet out of the total of 168 million acre feet. India has to make do within this 32.6 million acre feet. Now we are talking about a situation in which at the time of partition, as it happened, India was left with practically no irrigation works in the parts of Punjab and present-day Haryana and in parts of Rajasthan, which in earlier days, which used to be integral with Pakistan, and in the irrigation systems and the food security systems used to be taken as an integral whole. But then, because of this division, it happened that India had a very severe problem of food security, because in the crucial fertile areas of Indus plains, it was left with no irrigation systems at all. And it was required for India to develop these irrigation systems at any cost, because otherwise it would have created a very serious socio-economic problem in this country. We had to bear a burden of a large number of immigrants who came from West Pakistan, who also came from, of course, East Pakistan or Bangladesh, and simultaneously the Eastern Punjab in those days was a very drought-prone kind of an area. Food productivity was very low, and for that it was very much necessary for India that it will develop these areas in a manner that it becomes easy for this particular part to really become the food security goal for the country. And for that, the Bhakra project, Ong project, and then the Thain or Ranjit Sagar project with the Bias link, Madhopur link, and Indira Gandhi Nehar projects were required to be developed. And for that, it was very much necessary that eastern rivers, which had a reasonable length in India part, will have to be developed. And it is in this context that the Indian engineers and the Indian planners agreed that we should have a good handle over the eastern rivers, whereas in case of western rivers, the topography and the terrain being such that the consumptive usages will have a difficulty in implementing, and it will be at a great cost that we will have to carry out those works. So in that context, the India took a stand and agreed to a situation where we landed up with something like, say, about 20% of the water resources available to Indus Basin, even though being an upper riparian country, and could have demanded a situation where we could have said that we needed a larger share, because in those days, and even now also, there are desertic areas in the state of Rajasthan which are not having adequate water supply, and they do suffer, and we could have done with a little additional water. But then, even with this water, we have been able to largely carry out works in a manner that we are a food sufficient and a food surplus country, and our energy security and our water security in the northern parts of India is very much assured. Because of this, we have got something like 13.5 million acres of irrigation in Satluj, flood protection in Satluj and Bias basins. And one very interesting thing is that in Indus Treaty, this 32 million acre feet of water has come as a part of a situation in which India contributed in those days, such a difficult time of financially and otherwise, British pounds 62.06 million to Pakistan in order to compensate them for the loss of irrigation works and irrigation supplies temporarily, which would have occurred. And this would actually amount to something like $4 billion at today's level. In case of the western rivers, we have only got a part in which we have got the storage of very limited to 3.6 million acre feet. That 3.6 million acre feet is primarily to be used for the local irrigation, because the large parts of the states of Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, and Chenab Valley, in which large parts of the Jammu are lying, they are also equally arid, and they need very severely, they need the water in order to maintain their irrigation and maintain their food security and their energy security. So 3.6 million acre feet is the only storage that is permitted for a consumptive use. For a non-consumptive use, the entire issue is directed and governed by the hydroelectric power, and that is concerned with the annexure D. And in hydroelectric power, we have a potential of 19,234 megawatts in the western rivers, which can be developed economically, out of which 3,569 megawatt only have been developed so far. And rest of the thing are under either the planning or investigation, and they may come up at a later stage. So overall, even after being an upper riparian country, there has been a very generous regime of water utilization that has been implemented by India so far in a manner that the overall water availability do not really suffer. There are these days a lot of issues of water availability. In case of India also, we have got this kind of issues of water availability. There are also similar kind of issues are raised at Pakistan level, where they say that because of the waters being taken away by India, you do not have adequate water and your agriculture is suffering. But the crucial issue is that we have to realize that the water resources are finite. There are no infinite resources. It is not possible for an upper riparian country to keep on providing for the increasing demands without really having a regime of water use efficiency. In case of the consumptive usages, it is very much necessary that we have to really look at the water use efficiency that we are achieving by way of utilization of the water. This part is of course not really very explicitly put in the Indus Water Treaty, but this is a part which is actually assuming a great amount of importance. Because in case of India, what we are seeing is that by way of having a good water use efficiency, we are able to create surplus food storages for year after year. In case of Punjab and Haryana and also good parts of Rajasthan. Simultaneously, our efficiency, because of the efficiency levels, the water is stretched to extra usages. For example, now the water also reaches for the drinking water supply of Delhi, which was not really that much envisaged in the earlier part. And like many other extra usages in the industry, etc., could also be compensated by way of managing with the irrigation efficiency. In case of Pakistan, what we have seen is that even after 145 million acre feet of flow, irrigation is using about 101 million acre feet. And out of that, at the farm gate level, only about 65 million acre feet is reaching, whereas there are losses of 36 million acre feet. This is a situation which can very substantially alter the water crisis in Pakistan if we look in a very detailed way into the water use efficiency areas and work very seriously on implementing the water use efficiency measures in the irrigated parts of Pakistan. We are also looking at the situation where we are having something like 30 million acre feet of water of Indus is going to sea without getting utilized. Water will eventually reach sea. It is not a situation where one can say that the water which is occurring in a river will never reach sea. It does reach sea, because there is going to be return flows, there are going to be flows through the groundwater, and because of that the water eventually reaches the sea. But then if that water reaches the sea without getting utilized, then that particular water does not generate any economic benefit. So we have got something like 36 million acre feet plus another 30 million acre feet. If the efficiency and the utilization is taken up, more than the eastern river's share can be generated right within the Pakistan, and the entire water crisis that is being put and being projected, which is of course justified in an immediate sense, but these measures are something which are required to be looked at. We also need to look at the stretching our own water resources within India, because these are the only water resources available in this part of the northwest India. In case of the Rajasthan, we have practically no water occurring in that particular parts of the country, which is also a part of the Indus Basin. And also in case of the plateauic areas of Haryana, also there are no other indigenous sources of water out of which the entire demands and entire water security management can take place. So from this angle, it is something that we need to really look hard in our own Gireban and look and see that how best we are able to use this water in the manner that is required, so that we are able to make best use of this treaty. This is the need of the hour. As far as the hydropower is concerned, we have had a lot of differences of opinion. The large amount of differences of opinion are cropping up about the silt management areas, because in case of Chenab River, the silt content is extremely high. It is happening that the Chenab River silt content is so high that it will remain somewhere around, nearly, towards the higher side in the world. And if we have to build an economically viable hydropower project as it has been mandated in the treaty, then we have to do a very efficient silt management. Because if we do not do the silt management, then our storages will get filled up in a very, very short time. The entire investment that is made for the development of the hydropower project will go partly waste, because in that case, then you will not be able to use hydropower for the peaking power, for which the hydropower is a prime requirement. So from this angle, we need to really implement new technologies. And for this implementing these new technologies, we need to really look at the sediment management regimes that are coming up across the world. We demonstrated in case of in very great detail in case of Baglihar, and then later on in case of Kishanganga, that how the silt management in a modern sense is happening in case of run of the river plants, and how we have implemented it. However, while implementing this, the live storage has been kept exactly as per the provisions of the treaty. There has not been even a 0.01 MAF kind of a variation between what was required and what was mandated by the treaty and what has been actually provided. And even there also, the total development that has happened is only about 3,569 megawatts out of 19,234 megawatts. So even in these areas, we have not yet used, and we will take quite some time in using this. Secondly, this storage, which actually comes up as a part of the hydropower projects, is something which actually regulates the flows. And this regulation of the flows is something which is very beneficial in a monsoon-fed river like Chenab. In Chenab, or in generally in Indus basin, if you see, the large part of the flow actually occurs during the monsoon season. Monsoon season flows are as high as somewhere like 70% of the total annual flows of Indus River. And these 70% flows are occurring within 90 days of time. So if you have good storage management, then only you will be able to regulate the water, you will be able to use the water in your lean season. And for that, actually the hydropower developments that are happening in India, I feel that there should be actually a good storage management, joint storage management mechanism should have been there, with which regulated flows could have been given to Pakistan, which would have benefited in their reducing this particular loss, which we say of about, say, 30 million acre feet, which is practically going to the sea. So there are Indus Treaty, to my mind, is a very, very efficient and a very, very rational example of water management in a very complex political situation. And simultaneously, there are new areas which each country has to explore within themselves in order to see that how best the provisions that have been made with so much amount of thought and so much amount of care can be really implemented. Thank you very much. I might have exceeded the time, but then I thought that let me put all the positions on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Pandya. Now I would request the best
Dr. Singh.
I would request Ambassador Abdul Basit to kindly start with the comments. Ambassador Abdul Basit.
Ambassador Abdul sir, it would be kind if you could unmute yourself, please. You're currently on mute.
So kindly unmute it yourself.
Yes. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First of all, my thank you very much and my warm greetings to all the co-panelists. It's a pleasure to be here on this platform and sharing our views. I think the previous speakers, two speakers, have given us enough material to now build on that. As far as I'm concerned, I do not see any problem when it comes to the Indus Waters Treaty, so far as the two countries are abiding by the letter and the spirit of the treaty. So far we have seen that being an upper riparian, India did create some situations whereby Pakistan had to go to the World Bank, a neutral expert in court of arbitration. You take Baglihar Dam or Kishan Ganga or Ratle Dam. So these projects have created some problems in taking the whole issue forward. Having said that, I think this is one of the treaties between Pakistan and India which has so far been implemented effectively and overall to our mutual satisfaction. Now, a few points raised by my friend Mr. Ashwin about efficiency and so on and so forth. I do tend to agree with him that both the countries do need to increase efficiency as far as water consumption is concerned, because water is increasingly becoming a rare commodity, and it is becoming a death and life issue for all of us. So as far as I look at it, both the countries, despite their hostility, animosity, they do need to cooperate on this issue. And since this treaty is a permanent treaty, neither country can revoke it, suspend it, terminate it unilaterally. So this is, this treaty is going to live with us. If there are problems by any one party, those should be discussed bilaterally, and we both try to overcome, to get to grips with those problems, rather than threatening that blood and water cannot flow together. Because that is, as was done by Prime Minister Modi after the Uri attack in 2016. So if that is the spirit, then obviously that germinate, many apprehensions in Pakistan. So we need to avoid that kind of language, threatening the rhetoric, in order to preserve this treaty. Because even if there was no treaty like this, under the international water law, India was bound to, as upper riparian, was bound to not to stop the flow of water to Pakistan, as China, being the upper riparian of India, is bound by international water law to keep to allow the flow of water into India. So treaty or not treaty, I think even under UN Charter, Article 2.4 is very clear about the flow of water. So I think what we need to do is that we need to preserve and build on this treaty, rather than using a threatening language, because that will take us nowhere. There is already a huge problem facing us in Jammu and Kashmir. We need to resolve those issues, Siachen issue, Sar Creek issue, and if you open a new kind of situation for both the countries, then you can imagine that we will never get out of this vicious cycle of one step forward and two steps back. So we need to really, the sane voices on both sides of the border need to understand that water is a serious issue, but we can, through cooperative framework as available, provided for under the Indus Waters Treaty, we should be utilizing that to the maximum in order to overcome our issues. But as far as, sitting in Islamabad, I can tell you that so long as India adheres to the letter and the spirit of the treaty, we see no issue. But if there are certain concerns, which may be, right concerns, we can always discuss within the framework of the treaty. There are two permanent commissioners there who have been meeting regularly, but there are concerns in Islamabad as well. And those concerns can also be discussed without referring the matter to neutral expert. But we have tried in the past that our bilateral discussions, when exhausted, only then had Pakistan gone to to the World Bank for appointment of neutral expert or overcoming the legal issue through the court of arbitration. So Pakistan, we also understand, and I have been saying to my Pakistani friends as well, that we do waste water. And we need to, come up with solutions to this. And our Prime Minister is very cognizant of this issue, that we need to enhance our efficiency as far as water consumption is concerned, water usage is concerned. So we are aware, we are cognizant of that, and we are taking measures to that effect. But my suggestion and my submission to my Indian friends would be, or to the Indian government, that this is one treaty which has survived many a crisis. So this is an important CBM. So we need to build on those CBMs rather than unravel them or scupper them for no good reason, because even under the Indus Waters Treaty, you are allowed to use 3.6 million acre feet of water. You are allowed to produce 18,000 megawatt of energy. So you do have those, provisions available under the treaty. So as far as I can see it, that Indus Waters Treaty has overall worked effectively to our mutual benefit, to mutual kind of benefit. So this needs to be preserved, and we should build on that rather than making this too a bone of contention.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your fine comments. I would now request Ambassador Sharat Sabha to come in. Ambassador Sharat Sabha.
Thank you. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me begin also by offering my greetings to our fellow panelists from Pakistan and from India. Let me say how happy I am to participate in these discussions at a juncture when the treaty is approaching its 60th anniversary, the Indus Waters Treaty. Now, as someone who served long years in two postings in the High Commission of India in Islamabad, I did hear a lot of concerns, more during my tenure as High Commissioner, both from government officials and from common citizens, regarding alleged acts of omission and commission by India in implementing the Indus Waters Treaty, which they thought were responsible for water scarcity in Pakistan, and therefore there was a need to resolve the water issue. At one stage, we found that suddenly, in addition to other issues, this so-called water issue had come up. Now, as far as we are concerned, we believe in India that there is no such issue to be resolved, as the issue of water sharing that arose in 1947 was settled when the Indus Waters Treaty was adopted in 1960 for sharing of waters. And as everyone has acknowledged, the previous speakers, it has withstood the test of time through the ups and downs of the relationship. But I would like to address myself a little bit to the concerns which I heard. Some of them have been alluded to by Mr. Pandya in his presentation. First, as he said, India as upper riparian offered very generous terms. We accepted very generous terms which were given to Pakistan. And this, when India itself is not a water abundant country, we have given our own population shortage of water, yet we accepted those terms. Now, over the years, India did not use fully its share of water. On the western rivers, I don't think till today we are fully utilizing our share of water, although the usage allowed to us, to my mind, is a very small percentage. If I recall correctly, only 3 to 4% of the mean flow in those rivers. Now, because of lack of infrastructure, and this is, I am saying because this led to some expectations in Pakistan which were unrealistic. Because of lack of infrastructure, a good quantity of water in the eastern rivers also has continued to flow to Pakistan over the years. For example, I came across a Pakistan water strategy issued by the Ministry of Water and Power of Government of Pakistan, I think in 2002 or 2003, which noted the availability of 8.4 million acre-feet of water from the eastern rivers. This somehow led to an expectation that these quantities would continue to flow. But now that the government has decided to work on infrastructure to fully utilize our share of water, I think it's a good move, and I think it's our right to fully utilize the water that has been allocated to us under the treaty, and I don't see how there can be any objections to that. A point which was also made by Mr. Pandya. My experience was that each time the quantum of water flowing in the western rivers went down, India was blamed for diverting water. Now, as Mr. Pandya said, the Indus Waters Treaty does not cast no obligation on India to provide any fixed quantity of water in the western rivers to Pakistan. All that it provides is that India will let flow to Pakistan the waters of the western rivers minus the usage allowed to India. And then if you see the flows, as was stated, I think, by Mr. Pandya earlier, they depend upon melting of snows, they vary with rainfall and so on. And I studied this data very carefully at some stage, and I found that the curve was zigzag. In one year, they go down, in another year, the flows move up. Rather than a secular downward trend, which would indicate any attempt by India to divert the share of water of Pakistan. Another problem I think that we have faced, and that our interlocutors in Pakistan ought to realize, was the expectation that when India was going to build a hydroelectric project, it would proceed further only when it had satisfied Pakistan completely about the design, etc., adopted. Now, this sort of created an expectation as if there was a veto over the design, infinite veto, which happened, in fact, in the case of the Tulbul navigation project in 1986. We suspended it as a gesture of goodwill. Then for many years, no decision has been taken on it. So I think we believe that our engineers adhere very meticulously to the provisions of the treaty in preparing those designs. We fulfill the obligation of giving that information 6 months before commencement of river works. But then we believe after making a reasonable attempt to satisfy Pakistan, we are within our rights to proceed with the project, subject to any awards that may be given later on. Then another point which was noted, I'm happy it was noted from Pakistan also. I believe, and this is what I said during a speech I made at Karachi for the 50th anniversary of the treaty in April 2010, that the issue of water scarcity in Pakistan cannot be framed only in terms of flows from India, that it must take into account the management of water within Pakistan. And in that speech, I pointed out many shortcomings in water management in Pakistan, based on reports of the world bodies and Pakistan's own water strategy reports. And preparing for today's session, I had a cursory glance at some more recent reports of international bodies, IMF and World Bank, and some media comments, Pakistan media comments. And I find that many of those problems persist. And some of them were referred to by Mr. Pandya, but I think they bear repeating. First, that Pakistan's water intensity rate, the amount of water in cubic meters used per unit of GDP, is one of the world's highest. It remains the world's highest. Then, of course, a lot of Pakistan's flood water is wasted. In fact, I saw a report in the Pakistani press. The Senate Standing Committee on Water Resources was told in January 2020 that 29 million acre-feet of water was flowing into the sea downstream Kotri in Sindh. So some of these issues can be resolved only by Pakistan, and it's not in the hands of India to offer a resolution of those issues. Very briefly about the future of the treaty. That was one of the issues listed in today's agenda. My personal view, of course, is that the treaty has worked well and should continue to govern water sharing between India and Pakistan. But of course, we are fully within our rights to use our own share of water. And I'm glad that our government is taking some steps to build infrastructure to do that. I must also say that in spite of vociferous complaints that I heard, not only from officials, as I said, but from common citizens also, regarding the functioning of the treaty, I never heard any Pakistani interlocutor telling me that since the treaty is not functioning well, let's abrogate it. I mean, that would be the logical next step. If there is a feeling that a treaty is not working well, then somebody may suggest that. Nobody told me that since there are obligations anyway under various international legal provisions and so on, this treaty is not needed. I think I was told that the treaty should continue to govern, which, as I said, is my personal view also. But my impression was that there was an expectation of something. In some cases, I'm not saying all technical experts and so on, of Indus waters plus something, and that plus was something in the eastern rivers. For example, common citizens in my audience, 2 or 3 asked me the question, but why are these rivers dry? You see Ravi is entirely dry. You are stopping all our water, not realizing that eastern rivers had been allotted entirely to India. There was this sort of expectation, which, as I said, is unrealistic, both in terms of the treaty and the fact that India itself is not a water abundant country. And then, of course, any attempt to, I believe, to reopen the treaty, to upgrade it, as it has been suggested sometimes, would put it infinitely in a melting pot from which will never emerge, because after all, it took us 8 years earlier to put this treaty together. And I also believe that Permanent Indus Commission is quite capable of dealing with the challenges that arise from time to time through mutual agreement. Finally, I must say that it is my view that no treaty can work well without a reasonable degree of trust between the parties to it. And sadly, I must say that trust between India and Pakistan has remained seriously frayed over the years. Let me give you two examples. I sat through one meeting on Tulbul Navigation Project, where our side proposed that, look, we'll give it to you in writing that we'll not close the sluice gate during lean season. And the response that we received was that, and you will give it in writing, but what if you close it? There is no answer to that. Unless there is trust, no treaty can work well. And the second, of course, is an argument which I think General Lodi also mentioned. It is an argument of late water expert John Briscoe, which is often quoted in Pakistan, that India will acquire cumulative live storage of hydroelectric projects, which would be large enough to give India the capacity to impact the timing of flows into Pakistan. Now, this is again a matter of trust. I don't think India can be expected to give up its hydroelectric potential just because of these kind of unfounded insecurities, if I may say so. That leaves with the discussion on why trust has frayed is beyond the scope of this webinar, I believe. Suffice it to say, I would say that it has not been on account of lack of efforts by India to build greater trust and better relationship between the two countries. We have always believed that bilateralism is the best way of proceeding forward. But discussions can be fruitful only when they take place in an atmosphere which is free of violence and terror and so on. And it was in this context that a remark of our Prime Minister, which was mentioned here, was made. That remark only captured the public sentiment in the face of certain incidents of violence and terror and so on. But we, as I said, I would emphasize that we believe that bilateralism is the best way of proceeding, but it can be fruitful, it can lead to fruitful discussions only in an atmosphere which is free of violence and terror. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can we check with Uttam Sinha if your audio is okay?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and apologies for this technical glitch. Not used to such kind of medium. let me just, since things have gone a little haywire, let me just make some very brief observation for the following speaker to take up. Am I okay now? Audible? Am I?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. No, I think the Indus Waters Treaty, 60 years, raises a lot of question. I mean, a lot to do in retrospect. But one of the most interesting questions that comes about is the issue of generosity, I think. And that was a big debate during the time of signing the treaty itself. And if one is to look at the debate in the Lok Sabha in the November month in 1960, this whole question of India's generosity, and at times some of the leaders in the parliament would say over generosity, was a question that tested Nehru at that point of time when he was to sign the treaty in September. It was an important political question as much as it was a water sharing question. For all the intelligence, all the energy, and the mountain of paperwork that the two countries spent in the negotiation, which went for more than 8 years, I think the Indus Waters Treaty was strangely viewed by both the parties, India and Pakistan, as a giveaway of the respective water interests. So, you know, in a very strange and ironical way, while the treaty was signed, there wasn't a real trust around it. You know, both the countries viewed that each had given away much of its interest. So it started on a very negative note. And that was something that has been carried through in the last 60 years. I think the only actor in this treaty which was genuinely happy, I think, was World Bank, which it has seriously thought that the Indus Basin was a tinderbox and that it would be a flashpoint for conflict between India and Pakistan. And when both the countries didn't get anything, the World Bank felt that at least both the countries got something, and the peace, however fragile, prevailed. There are 3 points and three facts of the treaty that still haunts us today. The first is the unfairness of the treaty, and this is the interpretation of both the sides, whether you're in India or you're in Pakistan. Second, and which was hugely debated, which we often forget, is the cost of the replacement of the canal works that happened. And third was the overall context of the India-Pakistan relations, which was also very important during that time. I think the pulse beat, if one were to look at 57, 58, 59, and 60, the pulse beat on the treaty signed by Nehru was not very healthy in India. Many of the new mainstream newspapers, one would recall, had castigated the government for giving in to Pakistan, making concessions after concessions as the negotiation progressed. Often the editorial would say, yielding to Pakistan's wishes. Probably Mr. Pandya would recollect that there is a magazine which used to be published by the Ministry of Irrigation and Power called Bhagirath. And in its editorial, it was written a memorable agreement. You know, it had a bit of sarcasm to it. And it talked about, you know, the kind of gift that India gave to Pakistan, the 10-year period of transition and 3 more added to it, was all something that was much discussed, and the public mood generally in India was not very forthcoming on the Indus Waters Treaty. I mean, many described it as the second partition, which India was experiencing, especially when the Honorable Prime Minister signed on the treaty itself. I think the debate also clearly suggested that the per capita use of irrigation infrastructure in Pakistan by 1960 was 3.5 times more than in India. And from the western rivers, India got only a small amount. And on the eastern rivers, which in principle were assigned to India, a vast amount of water was flowing unaccounted into Pakistan itself. So from various positions and from various angles, it seemed quite clear that Pakistan was the water surplus country, and India was increasingly becoming water deficient. And this is something that we have to look at in the last 60 years and see how we're going to frame our future relationship as we move forward. I think Pakistan also, if you look at some of the technical evaluation, actually got 80% and a little more than what India got in terms of the volume of water. In fact, there was a point of time that India was negotiating for a 40% volume of the water. Eventually, it ended up with a little less than 20%. And I think this element of our reduced power in negotiation to meet our interests while we were negotiating with Pakistan was really talked about in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha, and the Prime Minister was admonished for this kind of a negotiation tactics. Of course, he had his way of convincing the parliament. He would always say that we have to look at the larger context of things. We have to have a larger picture. And these matters of giving money to Pakistan, whether it's 15 crore or 12 crore, are a matter of just figures. We have to see a larger approach to this whole issue. And the larger approach of India was to establish friendly relationship with Pakistan, to have peace and stability in the region, which was quite crucial for India as it went forward its own development planning. But even in that case, I think people like Morarji Desai, who was the finance minister during that time, was quite dismayed by the fact that all the generosity that India gave to Pakistan, the return was very little. We all will recall very well that Ayub Khan, very soon after signing the treaty, started claiming for the river sources in India as being part of Pakistan. A large chunk of territory was given to China soon after signing the treaty. So even in the context of generosity in terms of return was not really achieved by India. So in many sense, I think these elements, these questions are coming to haunt us after 60 years. And the question of whether we gave away too much of water to Pakistan or whether we were rational in our approach on the Indus waters will haunt us, will question us, and will open space for thinking about what to do with this treaty. This treaty, of course, has lived 60 years. It's been quite robust. It's been robust because India has kept the treaty alive, being an upper responsible riparian state. But I think the future will really test this treaty. And I think this is something that the panel would like to reflect and the audience would like to, suggest and question as to whether this treaty has the steam really now to move forward. Or are we going to see a period of time where we're going to increasingly talk about the abrogation of the treaty, or we're going to talk about optimizing this treaty by building and utilizing the provisions that the treaty has given to India, or think about possibly a new treaty in itself. I think these elements would be important for us to reflect upon. Thank you.
Maybe now we can have General Gurmeet Singh, sir. General Gurmeet Singh. Sir, your mic is on mute.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Great. Firstly, my thanks to Chair and to Mr. Aditya for giving me this honor. And my respect to Lieutenant General Lodhi, my senior and my elder, and to Ambassador Basit. To me, this topic is very important to me because I was born next to Byas, served extensively next to Chenab, Jhelum and Indus. I've gone through all the 12 articles of the treaty and A to H annexures. So I understand the content of it very deeply. In fact, to me, when I analyze this treaty as a soldier, as a citizen, firstly, I will be candid. I'm not a diplomat and I'll not feign diplomacy. So looking very candidly, my analysis of this treaty is that this favors Pakistan. It favors Pakistan for a defensive system, agriculture, irrigation, and from every perspective. To me, this treaty is over benevolent from Indian side. It is over generous from Indian side. Although I agree that this is one of the most successful water sharing in the world today, it is the most liberal water distribution agreement. It is unique, it is detailed, it's efficient. I agree on all those aspects. But to me, this relates to pre-1962 and to pre-1965. And the strategic content, the security and the military strategic content has not been kept in mind at all. My personal perception. I feel this is unbalanced. Pardon me for my being candid on all these issues, because as a military man, how I have looked at the 6 rivers, eastern rivers and the western rivers. I always looked at it from the security point of view, our assets on the river and the water works. I always looked at it from security, safety, and disaster management in case something happened. That has been the method I have been looking at it. I have looked at it, the obstacle systems which Pakistan has created, keeping the defensive infrastructure in mind. I have also seen it from the maneuver warfare point of view, how our armor aspect will get speed, and also how the other side will delay us and attempt to disrupt our movement. In fact, I also see it from the cold start strategy. How will it assist us in achieving our aim, whatever aim we have from military point of view? I always seen it from amphibious capability and the fording capability. And therefore, I have looked at all this from the control point of view, control of the water flow, headwork, and these contents. The key question in my mind has always been that is water a strategic tool? Is it a strategic asset? And very innocently, when I look at this word water, W-A-T-E-R, and I take out this T-E, to me it is left with only war. So therefore, yes, water has got content of war in it. And if I look at that, then I want to ask my own self that can I, or can as a nation, we achieve the strategic reversal of Pakistan on the track which it has taken since independence, the track which it has taken of anti-India, hate India, proxy, lies, denial, propaganda, terror as a strategic tool which Pakistan has used. They've been on this for last 30 years. Can we use water also as one of the complement facilitator to ensure that there is a strategic review by Pakistan? It is a question as a soldier which I have in my mind, and I want to share it. Secondly, from my security military point of view, is it a water, is it a solution dividend? I would like to think. Can it be tool of a deterrence? And I would also like to say, like, when looking from the strategic tool point of view, can it be one of the element of power? Can it be one of the element to assist us in the war, conflict, or scenarios which have been existing? Pardon me for disruptive thought, but needed, because all other efforts of being good, holier than thou, diplomatic communication, good English, diplomatic English, has not assisted us. Because even today, when I respectfully heard General Lodi, who's been the former defense secretary, and I heard the former ambassador to India from the Pakistan, still, General Lodi said that Kashmir will talk later. I thought after 5th August 2019, this topic of Kashmir is an old story, old narrative. It's just a way of expressing. You know, having served 10 years in Kashmir, whenever I stood next to Jhelum or Kishan Ganga, one question came to my mind, that if I go along this river, which is my right, which is a very natural way of going in life, and I've always challenged to think that when the matter is sovereignty and territorial integrity, POK has got to get integrated with India one day. Somewhere, you know, China, Pakistan combined planning China-Pakistan economic corridor through POK. In fact, not digestible by me or as an Indian, as a soldier. So one day, POK, including Gilgit-Baltistan, is going to get reintegrated. And when I look in the same perspective, having seen the Chinese engineers working at Nashori project, having known that during this Corona time, they signed a contract of Daimar Basha Dam in Gilgit area, which is in the POK, part of POK. So these intentions, ill intentions, will not work. And therefore, once it is connected to water, once it's connected to treaty, I think there is a requirement of a little think. When I relate to our leader, BJP leader, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, when he said, we have decided to stop our share of water, which used to flow to Pakistan, and when he was relating it to Pulwama, when he was relating to 14th February 2019 incident, absolutely, anybody will think that why benevolence and generosity from our side when the other side has never left the card of hate India, anti-India, when it used terror as a tool of strategy. I don't know diplomacy, but I would like to talk from heart. And as a soldier, this is a way of talking. So please pardon me if anybody thinks other way. So therefore, I would like to factor that can we think of rerouting waters? Can we think of diverting water? Can we think of our own power generation plus side? Can we look at agriculture economy from this? And the trend which has started with the aspects like bifurcation of old erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, creation of 2 union territories, Article 370 and Article 35A, and also aware that Indian engineering capability as far as tunneling is concerned, rerouting of the water is concerned, that is fantastic because I visited all these locations and been witness to this aspect of it. Also, when I look at far too many anti-Indian intellects, I'm sure they will try to jump over this destructive idea of mine to say that this treaty needs a revision. In fact, most of the intellect, what they do, they adopt the system of A to Z. They will say that we must avoid this, we must create good relationship. But how many steps we have taken to ensure that good relationships should be there? They will say, let's bypass it, let's cheat, let's deceive, let's evade. I won't come to the F part of it. But one thing is there, as a soldier, as a strategist, as a citizen, something which I'm happy that General Lodhi is listening. I'm happy that Ambassador Basit is listening. POK, including Gilgit-Baltistan, CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is just not acceptable because this is an issue of sovereignty and territory. And water is a strategic tool. Therefore, it needs a review. This is a very humble input which I wanted to contribute as a soldier. Thank you so much.
Thank you, General Gurmeet. I would request the chair to go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, all the speakers. I think quite clearly there is a lot of emotions evolved around the Indus Waters Treaty. As much as it is political, as much as it can be divisive, I think there is a thread of water for peace that binds us together. And it's an important narrative. It's not to be dismissed as being peaceniks or simply talking about the utopian. I think peace on water is important because it generally leads us to larger water development programs. And these water development programs can only come about when there is greater stability, larger peace prevailing. Development is essential because water leads to economic development, leads to prosperity. And I think we have to look at water in this frame, in the frame of rationality, in the frame of holistic thinking, and also in the frame of cooperation. We can't change the past as much as we cannot also change our geography. India will remain the upper riparian, thankfully a responsible upper riparian. Pakistan will remain the lower riparian with its angst, with its emotions, with its grievances that has to be dealt with. I think water is fundamentally unique as a resource because it binds angst with responsibility. It binds fear with generosity. And I think if we have learned anything in the last 60 years of the Indus Waters Treaty, it's precisely this. How a lower riparian and how an upper riparian can come together with all the historical grievances, with all the historical hurts, with all the history of 5,000 years that prevails on the Indus. The ability of both the countries to strike a treaty itself is uniquely significant in South Asia, and a uniquely significant definition between India and Pakistan. General Gurmeet thinks water in a different frame. It's a frame that has been talked about much of late in India. It buys a lot of credence in thinking about controlling water, manipulating water, using water as a matter of security concern. But I think largely all security-related matters, if you try to frame it in water, would require a complete different thinking. And I think that thinking does not really prevail in India. The thinking of manipulating water or using water as a tool or a weapon, I think that's not the kind of DNA that India has in its policy thinking. There are ways to deal with Pakistan, which we have demonstrably shown from time to time. And there are ways to go about on the water issues, which we have shown in the last 60 years. So I think these are the messages of the last 60 years, which has been quite critical in evolving relationship with India and Pakistan. There are three elements which I think will define the near future on the Indus waters. Abrogation possibly is the last resort. I think the first would be really to optimize the treaty that we have. And I'm speaking this from the Indian side. We haven't really looked at the provisions of the treaty, the provisions that gives India to do certain things. I think India must concentrate on those provisions. And it's fundamentally important to use the entitlement of the Western rivers in Kashmir, given the larger political situation in Kashmir, given the fact that Kashmir has to be integrated with India, we have to use the provisions of the treaty on the Western rivers far more actively than we have in the past. There are certain provisions on the Eastern rivers that we have to carefully look into. And I think that should largely define India's water policy on the Indus and its rivers. So I will leave this sort of thinking to the audience to think about and reflect about. And I think we have another session in which we'll have two speakers from India and one gentleman from Pakistan. May I ask Mr. Tikku to take over here on?
Well, we can have a small session of Q&A.
Okay.
And we have a question from Faiza Khan. So Faiza, over to you. And to whom your question is, kindly share. Kindly unmute yourself, Faiza. Fiza Khan. Go ahead, ma'am. Kindly unmute yourself, please. Or maybe we can have the other question from Kunal. Kunal, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Ambassador, resolution between India and Pakistan, the Indus.
Kunal, we are not able to hear you. Please come again, sir.
Am I audible right now?
Sir, we are not able to hear you. Please. Well, maybe I can.
Am I audible?
Yeah, better.
Good evening, everyone. My question is to Ambassador Abdul Bashid. Do you think that resolution of water problems which are arising between India and Pakistan right now may be the first step in solving all our disputes, including Kashmir?
May I respond?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. I think, as most of us on the panel have agreed, that by and large this treaty is functioning well. But there are some issues which have cropped up during the last 60 years, and we have been able to discuss them bilaterally. And whenever we failed, we went to the World Bank and under the well-prescribed dispute settlement mechanism under Article 9 of the treaty itself. So as far as Jammu and Kashmir issue is concerned, my friend General Singh mentioned about Azad Jammu and Kashmir and other issues. I'm sorry to say, but that issue, in my view, and I have been saying all along, is the core issue between our two countries. And unless the two countries invest, into its resolution seriously, we will continue to be. We cannot really have an environment of mutual trust. So while we preserve and build on upbeat confidence-building measures and strengthen them, consolidate them, it is equally important that we, in parallel, work towards resolving the real issues which do not allow us to build mutual confidence. And at one point in time, low-hanging fruits were Sir Creek and Siachen. But even we lost those opportunities in, for a variety of reasons. So in my view, while Indus Waters Treaty issues related to this treaty have been, more or less we have been able to resolve them, the Jammu and Kashmir dispute is altogether a different issue. It's not a territorial dispute. It's about 12 million people who are waiting for last 70 years to exercise their right to self-determination. And I hope that one day India does understand and we move forward in that direction. Because if India wants to, realize its regional and global aspirations, I think it is a kind of an imperative for India to have regional peace and harmony. India should be striving for that. And being a bigger country, it needs to be more magnanimous in resolving all these issues. So my viewpoint has always been like that. And I hope that, people like Ambassador Sabharwal, who know Pakistan very well, could play an important role in pushing India in that direction. There are misunderstandings, there are mutual apprehensions, but I think at the end of the day, as two mature countries, we need to sit across the table and work out our differences, look for tenable, solutions to these problems. But I would not agree with General Singh, with due respect, that Jammu and Kashmir, is an issue for which water can be used as a tool. If you want to set new precedents in international relations, please go ahead, because you're also a lower riparian when it comes to China. So then you are kind of opening a Pandora's box. So if you want to do that, go ahead. But for Pakistan and as for India, it is a life and death issue. So you are then, kind of further vitiating the bilateral environment. And if that is the intention, then we can't help India, I'm sorry. But as far as the articulation of the treaty itself is concerned, and as you know, the treaty allows India to use 3.6 million acre feet of water, produce 18,000 megawatt of energy. So Pakistan cannot have any objection to that, because that is your right within the framework of the Indus Waters Treaty. So that would be my, submission. And I hope that when today we conclude our discussion, and I totally agree with Mr. Sinha, that abrogation of the treaty is kind of, first it cannot be done unilaterally. And if the two countries do agree at some point in time to reopen it and renegotiate it, that may be done. I have no problems with that, but that has to be done with mutual agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. The question from Faiza Khan is, elements of water crisis may put pressures on affected parties to obtain more of shared water resource, causing diplomatic tension or outright conflict. It is believed that the climate crisis and the growing global population are the two factors that together could act as a major trigger to water conflict. Don't you think, sir, it's a global environment crisis more than just conflict between the two countries? And what serious measures do we have to resolve such matters? The question is basically for both the ambassadors, please. So maybe we can start with Ambassador Abdul Basit, then over to Ambassador Sharat.
I cannot agree more. I mean, climate change is an important issue for all of us in the region and for the world as a whole. So Pakistan and India need to understand that wherever we need to cooperate, we should create an environment where we are ready to cooperate. But I fully understand that the primary issues do kind of play out the way they do, unfortunately, between Pakistan and India. So hence, my submission is that we need to work in parallel. We can't isolate or insulate one issue from the other and cherry pick. Hence, Pakistan has always been talking about a comprehensive engagement between the two countries. So it is simply, I mean, to me, it doesn't sound plausible that we work on one issue, cooperate on one issue, and then, keep fighting on others. So we need to kind of, work in parallel. Wherever we find opportunities, we pick those opportunities, build on them, then also try to resolve the core issues which continue to bedevil our relationship. If that is the spirit, I think we can move on to our mutual satisfaction.
Ambassador Sabharwal, please.
I didn't get there was some disturbance. I didn't get the question quite clearly. Could you repeat it, please?
Yes, sir. The elements of a water crisis may put pressures on affected parties to obtain more of a shared water resource, causing diplomatic tension or outright conflict. It is believed that the climate crisis and the growing global population are the two factors that together could act as a major trigger to water conflict. Don't you think, sir, it's a global environment crisis more than just a conflict between the two countries? And what serious measures do we have to resolve?
No, I think I would put it in the larger context of what Ambassador Basit said earlier. He talked of, first of a comprehensive engagement But having talked of it, he then goes to a core issue. Now, we had a certain number of subjects under discussion at some stage, and we didn't think of any, that you could choose cherry picking, as he said, but that's exactly what you do when you talk of the core issue. The important issue from India's point of view, as you know, Ambassador, has been terrorism, and this is what I said earlier, and I'll come back to it now that we are going into some of those issues. I hear you talk of the people of Kashmir, but may I say that all that Pakistan has done, this is our view, and I must express it very candidly, for Kashmiris is to export terror, radicalism, and misery to them. That's all that they have got from Pakistan. Of course, we had been discussing this issue with you, and all along our position has been that the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir belongs to India, acceded to India. The only issue that remains to be settled is the return of areas illegally occupied by Pakistan. You talked of some low-hanging fruits, etc., etc. A lot of discussions did take place. But as I said, you cannot have a meaningful progress and discussions unless the environment is free of terror and violence. So that's one element that we have not been able to achieve, and that's been India's concern. We all agreed that the treaty is working well, and I must say I was a little surprised to hear from our Pakistani friends that the treaty is working well. That's not what was being said. I mean, I heard a lot of complaints about the fact that this treaty was not working well. But as I said, nobody told me let's abrogate it because it's not working well. But I'm glad to hear that you think it's working well and that it should continue. But you also heard the sentiment being expressed here. I said that when our Prime Minister, you quoted a statement, when he made that statement, he was expressing the public, he was voicing public sentiment. And that sentiment is growing. And I think Pakistan ought to be conscious of that. Our global aspirations are, we are going to realize them anyway, with or without Pakistan. After all, we have moved far ahead from 1947 economically in every other field of life, in spite of many difficulties that we have had. So I would say that, this is one example of cooperation, as you said exactly earlier. And that spirit, if that prevails, if discussions are held in an atmosphere free of terror and violence, then obviously we can resolve all issues. But till then, I'm afraid difficulties will keep on cropping up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, we have a question from General KJ. General KJ, over to you. We also have a question from General Rakesh Sharma to Dr. Uttam Sinha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Uttam?
Yeah.
Hi, sir. How are you?
Hi, Uttam. Long time. Tell me, you spoke about the three issues and you mentioned about abrogation. Is it even feasible to do abrogation in this manner? Even if we abrogate the treaty, for the eastern rivers, can we manage to do something substantial, or it is just spoken as a hype in recurring manner? A couple of years, every couple of years, we say we'll abrogate the treaty. To do what with the rivers? Do we establish reservoirs on the Indus, which is a gorge-based river? How do you do that? Or Chenab, or maybe Jhelum? Or a second part of the issue is, we have not been able to fully utilize Satluj and Beas. Beas, of course, merges with Satluj. But Satluj and Ravi, you see the quantum of water that flows across to Pakistan of the rivers that has been granted to us. And we have not been able to fully use it, and we want to abrogate the eastern rivers. Why have we not been able to fully utilize when we say our own Punjab has got water starvation problems coming up now? And how do you say that this treaty is unfair. In your one of the remarks, you said the treaty is unfair to Pakistan. How would you substantiate the remarks saying this treaty has been unfair to Pakistan? If there are not too many of them, Uttam.
Well, can I respond? No, I didn't say it was unfair to Pakistan. I said the debate during the time when the treaty was being signed, on both the sides, there was this huge emotion around the treaty being unfair. The debate was in India and the debate was also in Pakistan. So when the unfairness was being talked about, we eventually signed a treaty, which none of both the countries did not really want to. So we started off with a treaty on a huge distrust. And we have lived through that distrust in the last 60 years. But I think good sense and good diplomacy has prevailed over the last 60 years. And I think abrogation is more the rhetoric of the treaty. It doesn't fit into the cost-benefit analysis when you talk about abrogating the treaty. I think it makes, from time to time, it sort of quenches the passion of a certain section of society which raises the pitch, and one talks about abrogation. We've seen that in 2001 Parliament attack. We saw that in 2008 Mumbai attack. So it's quite repeated. But I think when sense and sensibility prevails, it comes down to the most critical question, and that is, how do we optimize the treaty? It is anyway pointless to abrogate a treaty without not having optimized it first. I mean, your entire history of 60 years of effort then will be laughed about. So I think it's important for India, and I think policymakers realize this element, is that the treaty gives India sufficient room, sufficient provisions to develop the waters, which it has not done over the last 60 years. And I think it's important that this government, and this government is paying a lot of attention as a national priority to build many of the water projects in Kashmir, on the western rivers, and on the eastern rivers. So I think for me, and for many of the panelists, I'm sure, the way forward for India on the treaty is to optimize the treaty.
Thank you, Uttam, sir. There is a question for General Naeem Lodi. General Lodi, are you there? General Lodi.
Right. Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you.
General Lodi, the question is Kashmir the real issue for Pakistan, and hence tries to use the treaty to delay and derail the projects in Kashmir?
First of all, I must appreciate that I think all the participants are speaking their heart out, and in a very decent manner. And, such a long adversarial relationship for 70 years cannot go just in a few days. It requires a lot of dialogue, and I think we'll have to keep on talking to each other before we reach any conclusion or something. Kashmir is important for us. That goes without saying, and I don't want to hammer more on that. Though I will, if you allow, I will answer a little query of General Gurmeet Singh. But I don't think that we link this treaty with the Kashmir issue, because in our opinion, and you have heard us, in our opinion, this treaty is quite fair both to India and Pakistan, irrespective of what few elements must be thinking about it. And I fully agree with the chair that both parties have this right to fully optimize the treaty. Whatever provisions are given in the treaty, I mean, both parties should go for optimization, and there should be, I think, no diversion on that. So we keep it separate. In fact, I was saying that this is one good event on which we must build our future relationships, and we must try to build more trust and go for the resolution of other issues, including Kashmir. Although, once we talk of Kashmir, some of our friends get upset, as somebody said that it is already resolved. It may have resolved on paper, all right. You might have also, occupied the territory which is there under your control. But just let us talk about the people. Have you controlled their minds and hearts? If you think so, let's go for a plebiscite. If you think that you have controlled their hearts and minds, so that is we will not discuss that. because for some other time, as General Gurdeep was saying, that water can be used as a strategic asset for wars and all that, and he was talking about obstacle system and all that. I think the chair brought it out quite clearly, and somebody else also, that nowadays wars are not of that type, dear General. We are two nuclear states, and we are not looking for any conventional conflict of that magnitude which you are alluding at. So I don't think that either Pakistan or India can use water as an asset of war mongering or war making or defending or whatever it is, because we are not likely to go to that level of conventional war. That is at least our thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, General. We have a question from Mr. Balraj Joshi, who is the former chairman and managing director for NHPC Limited. Balraj Joshi, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I just wanted to ask to the chair, Dr. Singh, I just wanted to ask him what kind of optimization you are.
Sir, you're not audible. Can you be a bit louder, please?
I just wanted to. Is it okay now? Hello?
Sir, no, sir, you are not audible. Please.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, better.
Right. I just wanted to know from the chair that he's talking about optimization, and General Lodi also referred to optimization. What precisely is meant by optimization? Can some example be given by them?
Chair, please. Chair and General Lodi.
I think Dr. Singh was not there. I'll repeat my question, Dr. Singh. The question is to you that we are talking about optimization of the treaty. What exactly do you mean by that? Can you give some example? How to optimize it?
Optimization here means, as I said, reading the provisions that has been entitled to us on the Western rivers. For example, storage of water. We haven't fulfilled that provision yet on the Western rivers. That we should be doing to a full capacity. And one of the reasons why there is a step forward in that direction is to make certain storage dams on the Western rivers, not challenging the provisions of the treaty, but participating in the provisions of the treaty. That is something that is given, that is an entitlement for India. Remember, India won the rights of the Western rivers in a long debate during the treaty, in which we conceded to some extent having the tribunals, the Permanent Indus Commission. There was a debate in 1959 that, whether, and Pakistan insisted that there should be a permanent neutral Indus Commissioner, which we fought against because we didn't like an outside third party to monitor us or to supervise us. And in our response, we said, the neutral international commissioner is not required. And we also won our rights of the provision on the Western rivers. Since then, we haven't really utilized those provisions fully well. And I think it's time that we focused on the storage capacities on the Western rivers. That is crucially important for us.
Yes, but that is allowed by the treaty. Nobody's stopping you.
Yes, that is very much. That's very much allowed by the treaty. You see the annexures, you'll find many provisions that have been listed, which we have just not followed it up.
So that doesn't change anything in the treaty. You are supposed to follow the treaty, so go ahead and follow it. What is optimizing this?
That's the optimizing your treaty. That's the technical expression by saying you optimize the treaty that has been given to you.
Okay. Thank you.
As I understand, I think if I'm just allowed to add,
please.
probably what Chair is saying is that we should take full advantage of all the clauses of the treaty, and Pakistan side will have no objection until and unless we have variance in view as far as the interpretation of the treaty is concerned. And for any variance, there are proper mechanisms laid down within the treaty that if there's any technical objection or if there's any other objection, we can always go to that, mechanism. So we have no objection on that. I think both the parties have the right to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we can take one more question from General Kamaljeet Singh. General Kamaljeet Singh, over to you, please. I guess your question is for Ambassador Basit. Please go ahead. General Kamaljeet, please. I guess Ambassador Basit is not there right now. So maybe we can like start with our second session.
Yeah.
Yeah. So start with the second session. We have with us the former Commissioner Indus, Mr. D.V. Thareja. We have with us Mr. Sanjay Gupta.
Aditya, if I can just butt in with my question, just one question, please.
Okay.
See, what I am saying is this treaty is a very antiquated treaty. When it was signed, the concepts like run of the river project, desilting of dams were not even thought of. Even things like the aqua life, the biodiversity part of it were not even real issues, ecological issues were not even considered. Now, when so many years have gone by, and when India makes a pitch to desilt our dams, go for a run of the river project, we find great opposition from Pakistan. May we have some comments from Ambassador Basit on this issue?
Thank you, General KJ. Maybe your question would be taken very properly from Javed Majid Saab, who is the former Secretary for Irrigation.
Okay, Aditya, you are the boss.
Just so that on the second session we have Javed Majid and former Commissioner Indus, India, Mr. D.V. Thareja, and Mr. Sanjay Gupta. He's a policy advisor and former consultant with World Bank. Chair, if you can start with the comments.
Yes, thank you very much, Aditya. Welcome to the second session. Heartening to know that I can be heard now. Let me start by saying that we've had a session where we have debated much the treaty itself, what it says and how we have interpreted it. I think a lot has to do with the interpretation of the treaty. And each side interprets it in various different ways, given the need and the requirement of the particular country. But this session would be a slightly more technical session, looking at water development projects, the future of the Indus Waters Treaty. I'm sure Sanjay will touch upon navigation as an important element of that, apart from the fact that the Indus River receives almost 40% of the glacial melt, and therefore the impact of climate change on this side of the Himalayas far more than, for example, on the Brahmaputra on the eastern side. I think these are elements, and I know Mr. Thareja has dealt with not only the Indus, but also on the Brahmaputra. So a bit of comparison and linkage, especially when a question was asked that beware of China being the supreme upper riparian, and where we have to almost face something like what Pakistan is facing with us. I think these are questions that will definitely come up. We would like to also hear from the Pakistan side, the gentleman, on how the future water projects are being shaped up in Pakistan, how they are respecting the treaty or whether they are not in many sense. And there are many other issues that I'm sure will be brought up. So may I first ask Mr. Thareja, and then we'll follow it up with Mr. Majid from Pakistan, and then Sanjay would then conclude the session. Sanjay, if you're alive and kicking, then why don't you start?
Okay, just to confirm, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I'm actually, going to take a little bit of a different direction. I think I'm hearing comments. The treaty overall seems to be working well. I think both countries have benefited from, I think, the stability in the treaty, which has been really a hallmark. It has an inbuilt dispute resolution mechanism, which has mostly worked. I mean, sometimes I think that the disputes have probably resulted in more straitjacketing as far as technical issues are concerned. So we've actually, my own view is that both countries probably have been harmed by the awards that have come about, because these have really limited the innovation and the technical options for both the countries, in the future. But I'm going to say, I think my view is that we need to really start looking at the next 50 years. That's the time frame of the thought. We are talking of water resources, which is not something you do over 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years, or 10 years. I mean, look at it that even after 60 years, we are still thinking, okay, what else we need to do in this treaty, or what we've been able to develop, not develop. So really, the whole thing is to really, I think, look at the next 50 years. And I think Article 7 of the treaty is something we need to really start looking at it, that talks of future population. And I mean, it is a sad commentary in some sense that we keep thinking of the current state of the treaty, or of the past, and we become hostage to the baggage of the past rather than really looking at, okay, how can the people benefit? I think there is a lot of stress on the nation state benefiting. That is what I've been hearing a lot in the discourse, not today only, but overall, when you look at newspapers, you look at commentators, the whole focus seems to shift to the nation state benefiting. Whereas my thing would be that, can we look at the communities benefiting? I mean, Indus Basin, on both the sides has very, very poor communities, very remote communities which are unconnected. I mean, can we look at issues where India and Pakistan anyway collaborate on, formally, informally, issues such as climate change, issues such as disaster management, issues such as scientific research, And in that regard, I'm just going to raise maybe 3 or 4 issues. I mean, one is, let me start with waterways, and which Uttam had mentioned. Many of you may be aware that, if you look at the countries on the eastern side, which is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Pakistan, they have been developing a very elaborate framework on waterways. And pretty soon, I mean, Bhutan already has access to the seaports of Bangladesh and India, and Bhutan is already negotiating as part of a transit treaty with India to also gain access, through the treaty, and that presents a very cheap transport mechanism, especially for bulk items, and more environment friendly. And I think there's a similar possibility. The Pakistan Chamber of Commerce and Industry actually has already presented a paper to the government of Pakistan to look at the navigability of the Indus and how it could actually revolutionize, and to look at this thing as an economic corridor. See, we always tend to think of a navigation as a transport corridor, but it's more. I mean, you'll have a lot of remote communities which can start trading with each other, which can, start exporting. You will have all your medium and small scale industries actually flourishing, being able to trade much better, which is what we had. If you look at pre-partition, or even, till the 60s, 70s, we had these very strong participation of the local communities in the whole riverine trade system, which we somehow have forgotten in favor of roads. Roads somehow became much more convenient in some sense, and we forgot the benefits because the mainstream society just took over. But and so how do we really look at Punjab in India, Punjab in Pakistan? We look at Jammu and Kashmir. We look at Himachal. We look at Haryana in India. Actually being able to really trade much better, to export. To find mechanisms to really start exporting using this, the waterways. That is one. The second is on the issue of climate change, and that's already been raised. And I think Uttam rightly mentioned that Indus is a very unique river globally, not just international. I mean, not just within the subcontinent, where 40% of the flow actually is from snow and ice melt. And that has huge implications. I mean, this is one region which is going to probably face among the maximum impact of climate change, and that is already being manifested in more extreme events. India has faced cyclones already 2 in the last 2 weeks, and those are all, we have been facing much more floods. And if you look at the economic cost of floods, they are increasing day by day because our infrastructure, of course, is improving in both the countries. So the economic cost of floods, while the lives lost is decreasing, but the economic cost is really rising exponentially. And that is another area where, disaster management, we do have a very important, center in New Delhi on disaster management. And I think that is one really area to look at very strongly. The third, which has been alluded, is water use efficiency. But I think, to be fair, it's on both sides of the border that we are really using water in a highly inefficient manner. Among the worst water use efficiencies we have in the world is actually in these two countries of India and Pakistan. And if we look at even countries such as Sri Lanka, we look at countries such as China, I mean, they have made very huge gains. And it's not as if we don't have the technology. It's really a matter of, I think, the social part, the political part, which is more important. I mean, water use efficiency, technology is well established globally speaking on this. It's a matter of, okay, I mean, if it doesn't pinch me to just keep pumping more water, I will start. I mean, I'll do it. I have free power. I have no governance on groundwater, so I will keep pumping more water. And it just harms everyone. And if you look at the new, I mean, the 1997 Convention on non-navigational uses of water, it clubs both groundwater and surface water. The treaty really is only dealing with so-called surface water. But if you look at the international norms now, and wherever the judgments have been passed, including by the the international court in Hague, they have really been they have been clubbing the groundwater usage and the surface water. And the river basin actually comprises both, both the groundwater. And if we really, that is another strong area for us to really start cooperating, is can we develop joint solutions, on water use efficiency, because the crops on both sides are very similar. I mean, it's rice and wheat, mostly to a great extent, and the mechanisms will be very simple, very similar. The socio-economic issues, I would say, are also maybe not very, very similar, but there is a lot of similarity still, in those, I would say that. The last and fourth issue that I'd like to raise is really, I think, power exchange. If we look at Pakistan, Afghanistan are actually collaborating with Central Asian countries. There's this CASA 1000 project where Pakistan and Afghanistan will be importing up to 1,000 megawatts of electricity from Central Asia, which is hydropower. And already on the eastern side, we actually probably, the policy framework is already in place for a very vibrant power trading market among the BBI, as Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal countries already in place. I mean, the thing is to really start linking the two. And I think a lot of inefficiencies have actually come in because both India and Pakistan are trying to independently develop power generation, I mean, on this Indus River. I think there would be, even for projects such as Kishan Ganga, or Neelam, or, although there would be much, if there is more collaboration, we would have far cheaper, far more environment friendly, far more efficient power production happening, and I mean, CASA 1000 is often touted as, because the cost is roughly about 10 cents. And it's often said that it is more of a political partnership than really an economic partnership. Because already, I think from solar, we are seeing the power cost to be maybe in the range of 4 cents or something like that. And so these are and we need not, my own view is that we need not really look at, start redoing the treaty. I don't think we have the right political environment to start opening up the treaty at this stage. But can we form even working groups to start looking at these 4 or 5 technical issues that people can agree on, and start coming up with maybe one joint activity, joint research, etc., to start small, build confidence, and to proceed. But honestly, the vision should be for the next 50 years, I mean, and not start, I think, looking at the last 50 years and we keep complaining. That would be mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Uttam sir, General KJ had a small question for Ambassador Basit. Maybe we can just take it, then we can go over to Commissioner Indus, right?
Sure.
Yeah, General KJ, please. General Kamaljeet, please.
You can pick it up again.
Well, yeah, Kamaljeet. So he says that Kalabag, Denar, Basha, how will Pak balance regional aspirations?
This is to Ambassador Basit.
Yeah. Ambassador Basit, please.
Regional, I couldn't really get the essence of the question, but we would be building these dams on the western rivers, which have been allocated to Pakistan, and so I do not see any problem as far as building Bhasha or Kalabag Dam is not under consideration at the moment, but Bhasha Dam, yes, we will be building it hopefully by 2028. So that would be exactly in kilter with the Indus Waters Treaty. So we would not be breaching or violating any of the provisions of the treaty itself.
So there is one more question from Anurag Vijay Agrawal. When Pakistan constructed river training works in such a manner to reduce river flooding in its area and enhance flooding in Great Run of Kutch area of India, which is a complete violation of Article 4.3a of this treaty, why Pakistan wants to continue the treaty when Pak has been working against the treaty? His question is also that, and J&K is an integral part of India forever. So why to negotiate again and again?
So this is the problem, So we are kind of stuck in a carapace, and we do not want to get out of that. If we keep repeating, or my Indian friends keep repeating that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India, then obviously we do have serious problems. And I think India needs to revisit its position. And if Pakistan does not have, if we have some capacity issues, we are cognizant of those deficiencies in our system, on our side of the border. And we are trying to get to grips with them. So we are not kind of shying away from acknowledging those deficiencies on our side. We are very much aware of those deficiencies, and we are working towards overcoming those problems on our side to make, as my friend Mr. Sanjay Gupta said, that and the chair as well also alluded to that. We need to optimize the usage of water, which is no doubt wasted on our side, on your side. For example, 90% of the water which we get is spent in the agriculture sector in Pakistan, which from my own personal viewpoint is not the effective usage of the water which we get. So Pakistan does need to, take some important measures in order to optimize the usage of water which we get from the western rivers. Having said that, I think we need to approach these issues with an open mind, and with the ability to compromise, with the ability to also take cognizance of each other's interests. Only then can perhaps we make optimal use of the Indus Waters Treaty itself. Thank you.
If I'm allowed to add a sentence, just a sentence.
Yeah.
Regarding Run of Kutch, if India feels that Pakistan is violating any provision of the treaty, we can resort to the mechanism of, whenever a problem arises, there is a mechanism of resolving that problem. So if India feels that Run of Kutch is being flooded and Pakistan is to be violating any clause, let's go to the arbitration or whatever World Bank has made the mechanism. Let's go there.
Under Article 9 of the treaty itself.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, one more question from General KJ, then over to this former Commissioner Indus. Desilting needs of Durhasti requires pragmatic outlook. Is Pakistan ready for that?
Aditya, if I can
Yeah,
explain the question.
yeah. Please, go ahead.
This treaty was made at a time when it was ancient times. Things like desilting, things like run-of-the-river projects were not contemplated at that time. Even biodiversity and ecological systems were not real issues. Now, today, when India needs to desilt its dams with better engineering techniques, okay, it's good for you to say that go to the Indus water mechanism. But every time you go there, it means delay of couple of years. The process is so long-winded. So, will Pakistan cooperate on issues like this, which are technical in nature?
I, being an engineer, I think if you allow, I will answer this question.
Please, sir.
Thank you very much. What I would say is that let us abide by the basic clauses of the treaty, and if we want to have any good add-ons, as you have mentioned that some new things have cropped up, as long as we adhere to the basic clauses and do not violate them, and if we can further add something to the treaty which is acceptable to both sides, why not? Especially if it is of technical nature.
No, but,
And secondly, if I may add, then, if you say that a treaty which was signed in 1960 is no more relevant, then this argument, I do not know how many decades or centuries you want to take it back. So there will always be, changes. But as very rightly pointed out by General Lodi, we need to preserve the basic letter and the spirit of the treaty itself. Then obviously, if we want to make some amendments to the treaty, that can be done with mutual agreement. So for that to happen, we need to engage with each other and engage with all seriousness and sincerity of purpose, in my view.
Shall we move forward, Aditya, and we ask
Yeah,
Mr.
go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Thereja, would you like to come in? If Mr. Thereja is having a problem, let's get in Mr. Majid and then we can wait.
Okay. Majid, sir, over to you.
Ji, hello. Yeah, thank you so much. Let me introduce myself a little more than I was introduced. I was in the army for about 17 years and shifted to the civil services. And I spent 4 years as Secretary Irrigation Punjab, which is a very large component of Pakistan's irrigation system. I was also Chief Secretary Azad Kashmir for 2 years and I reconstructed our part after the earthquake. So with that background, hello?
Yeah, please carry on.
My approach is going to be positive. I'm not going to be I'm not putting on war paint or giving any war calls. I'm looking at the future of both countries. Both countries' population is growing. We are going to be 400 million by the year 2040. I don't know, India is already 1.3 billion. I don't know where you're going to plateau. We need more food, double the amount of food we're growing today. And we need, very good seeds. We need to do a lot of research. We need to be more careful for our water. And probably even I would like to say that we should share technologies so they can help each other. Now, the additional thing that's come about is the corona. And we have to factor in corona because this has affected the entire globe. The entire globe's economies have sunk. We are suffering. You are also suffering. And we already have for 25% of our population at the poverty line. You also have about 25, 30. Your figure is about 700 million people who are poor. So I don't think we can go into adventures, but we should concentrate more now on looking at the needs of our people and ensuring that they have a happy future, a safe future. We don't have people dying on the streets because of poverty. Coming to the Indus Basin Treaty, I think it's held out very well as treaties go around the world. We have been able to, get through 70 years of it without fighting, and therefore, a lot of hue and cry in Pakistan at one time that India is stealing water and all. I don't think that's correct. I'll take India's side in this, except the filling of Bagliyar, which was a violation of the Indus Basin Treaty. There's a specific period given for filling dams. Except that, India has not stopped the water. The water that you have available to you in the north, 3.4 million, you're welcome to use it for your local uses, make hydro projects and all, staying within the Indus Basin Treaty. Now, as concerns some comments about the management of irrigation, since I was a manager, when I joined in 2000, you'll be surprised to know that we were facing a 50% shortage of water, 50%. And, this was met by sinking a lot of private tube wells. Something like over 500,000 tube wells were sunk, which affected the groundwater aquifer. I don't know about India, but here in Pakistan, the Doabs or the area between the rivers is all saline. We only have sweet water along the rivers. So we lost a lot, aquifer really sunk down. So I think that's a problem that Punjab is also facing. The two rivers that went, the three rivers, Ravi, Beas, Sutlej, that went to India. Do you know that in Ravi and in Beas and Sutlej, not a drop of water flows to Pakistan, except the water that's, let's say, let through when the dams are full and it's let down into the Sutlej. Otherwise, there is no water in the Beas and Sutlej. Ravi, water is generated on the Pakistan side because of the rains that we have. It's not water coming from India. We had per capita, when we at independence, we had per capita of 7,000 cusics per person, and now we are down to about, I think, 2,000. And this is grow to even less than that. I mean, it's going to be, Pakistan is going to be a really severely water scarce country. Now, the Indus Basin Treaty, when we say India got 20%, please also remember that you have Ganges and Brahmaputra and Nobra and other rivers also. The Sutlej and Beas and all were given for Punjab and for Rajasthan. And you actually created more irrigated land because of the treaty. In Pakistan, the financial help that we were given just replaced the water that was taken away through a system of links and dams, but we were not able to get additional water, which have bought more land under irrigation. We have millions of acres of land in Balochistan, lakhs of land in frontier, but we don't have the water to irrigate those areas. So I think my view is that we should be, there was questions about hate in Pakistan for India and all. Please, General Saab, come over to Pakistan. You'll be very happy. You'll be welcome. You'll be given pegs of whiskey. If you play golf, we'll feast you to golf. But our media, our people, there is not a word of Indian hate here. But I hear the Indian stations, and oh my God, it's frightening at the hate that those people have created for Pakistan and India. So I think you need to have a serious look at what's happening there. So positively, we'd not like to disturb the Indus Basin Treaty. Like the word was used, optimize. Yes, of course, optimize. For instance, all dams, the day they are made, they start getting silted and they have a finite, life. So you all the time got to think now where I'm going to make the next dam. The other thing is that flows to the sea, the normal year is just 5. It's only when we have a flood every 6 to 7 years that we will probably see 100 million acre feet of water wasted. But then where do you store that water? So these are the sort of concerns, and I think we should help each other to eliminate poverty in our countries, exchange technologies. Or I don't think wars is the answer or threats is the answer. Anything you do to the Indus Basin Treaty, India does, will give a precedence to China to do the same. The Ganges River emanates in Chinese area, and they've got the Gobi Desert that they want to irrigate. So don't give them any ideas. So let's live within what we have peacefully. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mazid. Interesting points. Is Mr. Thereja on now?
Sir, we are checking with his technical issues. So over to you, sir.
In the meanwhile, can I give a small intervention supplementing Mr. Majid? I'm Pandya.
Yes, Mr. Pandya, please.
Yeah.
Quick one.
Quickly, we had a very good cooperation with Pakistan in earlier days as far as the Indus Water Treaty was concerned. As I said, we were in the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage. Our founding fathers were basically the people who wrote the treaty, and later on, you see, like in 2003 and 4, if the people are able to see it, we had a joint effort with Pakistan National Committee on Irrigation and Drainage and Indian National Committee on Irrigation and Drainage, where we completely examined the status of Indus Basin at that point of time, and then what are the things that are required to be done and how that can be done. So there is a lot of possibility of water management level cooperation, and there are various means that have been adopted in India, like on-farm storage and various other things that can be very successfully replicated. And then especially we need to really address the relative cropping patterns that we have adopted in the semi-arid areas, which are actually creating the water stress. Thank you.
You're quite right, Mr. Pandya. Thank you. In fact, if you look at the history of the treaty, 1952, March 15, when the Working Party met together, the engineers of World Bank and the engineers of Pakistan and India, I think one of the most constructive and forward movement was evaluating the 25 years of data on the water flows of the Indus Basin. And I think it was a very important start to know what your data was, what your hydrological facts were, to move forward. And I think such elements of cooperation, such element of understanding, the engineering perspective, that is why the treaty is often regarded as an engineering sort of influence treaty, because it was the engineers who sort of thought about many things. And the whole idea of keeping politics from the engineering perspective moved forward to a great extent before politics came in a big way and the whole issue became rather difficult to accomplish. Mr.
Sir, you are on mute, sir. Kindly unmute yourself.
Hello, I think Dr. Thereja.
Uttam, sir, you are on mute. Kindly unmute yourself, sir.
Mr. Thereja, are you?
Sir, we are checking with Mr. Thereja. Please, you go ahead.
Okay. No, Sanjay made a very interesting point on joint working group on issues that we should look 30, 40 years ahead. And I think these are very interesting thoughts. We cannot be captive to the history of the Indus waters all the time. Of course, it's good to always discuss and debate and see history, but I think we do need to move forward. And it's important to look at some of the areas in which there can be joint working groups or joint cooperation. Joint was not a very good word to use when the treaty was being negotiated in the 50s. In my study, I recall Ayub Khan soon after the treaty was signed, saying that by accepting the procedure of joint inspection of the river courses, India has by implication conceded the principle of joint control extending to the upper region of Chenab and Jhelum. And joint control comprehends joint possession. And I think the word joint was not very well taken by India. There's a very interesting debate in the Lok Sabha. The young Mr. Vajpayee, who later on became the Prime Minister of India, confronted Mr. Nehru, and he expressed his deep concern over this joint control and joint implications of the Indus. And he warned India that at some point of time, Pakistan would be looking for a United Nations Security Council intervening in the basin. So I think these were some emotions and some thoughts that were prevalent during the time when the treaty was being negotiated. Those were very difficult times, hard times. I think we have moved 60 years hence, and we have a new sense and a new perception to and perspectives to the Indus Basin, which we should try to harness in the right direction. I think it's important to bring the people into the Indus Basin rather than, as Sanjay was saying, constantly think about a state-centric approach. I think this requires a radical shift in our thinking, a radical shift in our approach. Mr. Thereja?
Sir, he's just coming in. Maybe we can take some questions.
Yes.
In the meantime.
Please, hello, Aditya, please.
Yeah, there is a question from former chairman NHPC, Balraj Joshi. Mr. Joshi, please go ahead.
My question is for General Lodhi. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Yeah. So the question is for General Lodhi. Sir, it was said that technical issues can be resolved under the ambit of the treaty. And you also, being an engineer yourself, you appreciate the necessity of silt management of the reservoirs. And whatever the conditions we are experiencing in Salal is well known. And also Annexure D also provides for it. That silt management would be need of the hour. Somebody said that the treaty framers did not foresee this happening 60 years hence, but I would say that they have seen it happening actually, and they provided for it. They very clearly said that you can have under sluices. But then why Pakistan is constantly objecting to the issue of providing low-level sluices on the dams or on the western rivers? This is my question to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Question is understood. You see, silt management has a number of aspects. One is that whenever you build a dam, you assess its life, and you know that with each passing year, the life will keep, the capacity keeps decreasing, and the time comes that the dam, it completes its life. That is one, but that is a very passive way. The other two ways are, one is dredging, in which you dredge the silt and you put it somewhere on the sides, and a difficult thing to do. And the third is what you are saying, using the under sluices to take away the silt. Now, if this, because the silt doesn't come alone, under sluices, while using under sluices, you have to use water to take away the silt, as we understand. So if that additional flow of water will not create later on an issue while filling up the dam again, and if you can fill the dam within the prescribed period given, I don't think there should be a problem. The only thing is that if you use those sluices in days other than prescribed, or the water volume which is being depleted or filled is not within the treaty ambit, then probably we will have to think about it. So as long as it is within the treaty, good enough. But if the flow, because once you say non-consumptive use to make electricity, you understand it very well, that what does it mean. So this management of silt, the three ways which I have said, one is the life of the dam itself, the second is the dredging, the third is the sluices. So whatever is allowed in the treaty, we can always go for it. We will have no problem. But of course, it would require some technical deliberations, which I will not be able to answer off the cuff.
Thank you, General Sir. But the problem has been that in Kishan Ganga, for example, we had provided such sluices, but they were objected to very seriously by Pakistan in the Court of Arbitration also. I would say that, once we recognize that there is a necessity for desiltation and the method which you suggested was very, very nice and a nice way of doing it, then why should we be objecting? Because that is then again not in the spirit of the cooperation as was being made up. We shouldn't be
I
then
mean,
such issues.
right. I understand your point. It is just a matter of interpretation, and I do agree with you that the interpretation should be positive from both sides, and we should be cooperative in nature. And rather than saying that you can use this facility to do that, so that is a sort of mistrust. I'm for creating the trust, as long as we do not demonstrate that we have really breached trust at any time. So as I'm agreeing that mostly we have seen that India has not breached the trust in the past. So I would, if I'm given a choice, I would be positive in accepting things which are possible within the ambit of treaty. And if there's any misinterpretation or variance in interpretation, we can always go to the neutral expert, and we can, as happened in this case, you must have noticed that then you had to block those undersluices through proper concrete. It means that some interpretation was in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very comforting, Janazab. Thank you.
Well, DV Thareja is online. So, DV Thareja, sir, over to you. Kindly unmute yourself, sir. Kindly unmute yourself. Yeah.
Is it clear now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm very happy that ultimately I could be also part.
Sir, आप अपना mic अपने साथ phone के सामने रखते हैं, please.
Is it clear now?
Yeah, better. ऐसे ही रहिए. हाँ जी.
Well, it has been a very happy moment for me to listen to the entire discussion from experts of different.
थरेजा साहब, आप दोबारा म्यूट हो गए हैं. आप काइंडली अनम्यूट कर दीजिए.
Clear now?
Better.
Hello. Is it clear or it's?
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I'll share my view that what I have heard is treaty is such a versatile document that it can provide answers to all the concerns which both the countries have. But we have to appreciate that if someone, hello?
Go ahead, sir.
If someone reads the treaty and reads the clauses of the treaty, then one can think how difficult it must have been for the framers of the treaty to create that balance of both the sides. Each treaty clause is such that it caters to what is in the interest of Pakistan, and then it caters to what is in the interest of India. But most important is that when we went for adjudication, like with the neutral expert or the International Court of Justice, it became very clear that what you have to see is what is in the interest of the project. And one observation which Pakistan has been clearly indicating that India can flood us, India can deprive us of the water at crucial stages. This neutral expert has got the studies done by Pakistan itself to prove that a design which is sound and economical and has state-of-the-art provisions is to the benefit of Pakistan only. And am I audible now? Can I continue?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
So most important is to do a state-of-the-art engineering, and most of the time it comes from Pakistan. The treaty does not allow India to adopt state-of-the-art provisions. State-of-the-art provisions, what I want to say is, we have made Tarbela, we have made Bhakra. This is based upon the provision of engineering or the technology available at that time. Now, when we showed them the Salal, I visited Salal along with team of engineers from Pakistan, along with the Commissioner Indus, and they appreciated that this is not based on sound engineering. That's why India is suffering every year a huge loss on operation and maintenance of the project. So when this was appreciated, but then when it came down to handling Baglear, we said, we don't want to make another Salal, but it comes from Pakistan that this is what you are permitted as per the treaty. But the good part is the neutral expert, while giving adjudication, made it clear that treaty aims at sustainable development. It does not say that you go backwards in terms of your engineering technology and create something which is not sustainable. If the present technology is sustainable, then you are to go in to that kind of an engineering. That's why in Baglear, if I share with you that flushing was, why was flushing allowed? I can tell you that flushing was not requested by India. It was given by neutral expert because he realized that's the only way. Because what he said at that time was that after 15 years of operation of Baglear, when the Baglear will be silted up the way Salal is silted up now, you will be required to jointly sit together. Both the commissioners will be required to sit together and work on the operational criteria of Baglear. But at that moment, the entire team of Pakistan objected to that neutral expert is going out of its mandate. Then neutral expert said, no, sustainability is the mandate. And if you are not willing to sit after 15 years, let me give a decision right now that India is entitled to flushing as a sustainable engineering development. And I may tell you that India is allowed whatever we have listened to, 3.6 MAF, and look at the pondage of Baglear. It is 140th of an MAF. And when we were initially filling the reservoir, Pakistan commissioner had many calls, and at that time I was heading the unit, and I said that, well, if you are so uncomfortable now, it's better you visualize when we will do the entire development on our western rivers, you will have to have a matching thinking. Matching thinking, what I want to say is that you are not able to imagine that when you operate the reservoirs, there is a provision in the treaty that you have a 7 days kind of a provision of having a water balance, and then on a daily basis you have fluctuations. So treaty provides all the provisions which address, and again when neutral expert was resolving the issue, Pakistan raised that India design can flood Pakistan. But neutral expert got those studies done and projected it to Pakistan that it is India design which will cater to the future climate change provisions and is sound in ensuring that Pakistan is not flooded. And if you implement a design which was proposed by Pakistan for implementation on Baglear, that will create more problems for Pakistan. So coming back to, for example, Salal, if you see today, treaty provides us to do the modifications. We are going to do a modifications at some stage. Look at the kind of a suffering which will come to Pakistan when Salal will be modified. The sediment problems we'll be addressing and Pakistan will have to face it. So if Pakistan keeps on thinking that India should not do a sound engineering, India should stick to the restrictive part of the treaty provisions, then it is Pakistan who is going to ultimately suffer. Now, coming to that concern, that the trust, I always feel that it is only through external adjudication that they could tell to Pakistan that you need to have trust. And even when Kishanganga issue was getting resolved. Look at the treaty has been interpreted to cater to even the environmental needs downstream of Kishanganga. So to say that treaty lacks in certain provisions, it is a question of cooperation. It is a question of looking at, ultimately Pakistan has to think that whatever is provided on the western rivers to India, if you see that India exploits the total, it is not a big portion of the flows which are going to go to Pakistan, and they are not going to be affected out of the, what Mr. Pandya said, that out of the total 135 million acre feet, the 3.6 MAF, which is provided to India, is hardly any quantity, and it is not going to change the flows. It is a question of a feeling. It's a question of an apprehension. It's a question of a concern. That is where Pakistan needs to do a lot of a thinking, and every time you can't afford to go to a neutral expert or go to International Court of Justice. You have to now build on whatever has been given as a decision by both this international adjudication mechanisms. We should understand that they are the way forward, they are the guide forward, and we should not unnecessarily raise observations that it is India design is not treaty compliant. Just by saying this is not going to help to move forward. The right way is that if there is no treaty compliance, how to address it? You keep on seeing that man-made controls can make a difference. This is what Pakistan says. But you have to accept it that after all, we are the upper riparian. We have a control, but look at our record. We have never played any mischief. We are not going to play in future. And it is for Pakistan to accept that goodwill coming from India and tell to India that go ahead with your development, and we should always give our go ahead to all that engineering which we share with Pakistan. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a great presentation, sir. Well, now the floor is open for questions. So, just a moment. So there is a question from Navya. Navya, your question is for General Lodi. So over to you. Navya, ma'am.
You can read out the
Sir,
question
yes,
if
sir.
it is
Yes,
there.
sir. I have a yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a connectivity issue. Sorry, sir. So my question is to Uttam, sir.
Okay, okay.
So can we agree on the fact that there would be no considerable
Well,
impact
I
through?
guess Uttam sir's audio is right now not working. So maybe you had a question for General Lodi also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, so General
Go ahead.
Lodi, sir, could you comment on the extent of considerable damage that could be done through it, to Pakistan, since Pakistan has 70% of the water resources reliable on this in this water treaty? What do you think the extent of what do you think would be extent of India either limiting the water supply or abrogating the treaty unilaterally by India?
Okay, as far as abrogation is concerned, I think that we are not discussing, and both sides are agreeing that that is no solution, because it was with a lot of difficulty, more than 10 years of effort, that we arrived on this treaty. So let us not talk about that. I can only share with you the apprehensions. You know, I have also admitted, and I think that is a fact, that India actually has not really violated any big provisions of the treaty. There were certain misinterpretations, technical misinterpretations, and we both went to the neutral experts, and whatever the neutral expert educated, we were bound to accept that, and I think we will keep on doing that. If there's any, the last speaker, he was of course saying that we must build trust.
the problem is that the political differences on various issues are of both the sides are such that it spills over to technical matters also, whereas it shouldn't, as a matter of fact. So I think what we can do is that whatever decisions have been given by technical experts in the past, those should become a precedence. This is I'm not representing my government or not representing an institution, just my own thinking, and we should not fight on the same issues again. That will, I think, lay to rest many things. Now, your question that what apprehensions Pakistan has, India, by building a number of cascade of dams on Chenab, has the capacity and ability to empty them at a time which is not desired, or to fill them at a time which is not desired. Now, I'm not saying that they will do it, and I'm not saying that they've ever done it. But one is intention and the other is the capability. So they have acquired this capability, as one of their journals was saying, that we must use water as a weapon also. So, for example, if we need water in some season, and they empty all their dams before that, and they start filling all those dams. So for 60 to 70 days, they will make our land totally without water. Similarly, if in a season where we don't require water, or they want water in our area, they can empty all the dams, in a cascade manner, and they can do it. Although technically it will be difficult, all right, but that possibility is there. And I may or may not, agree with this thing. I'm not talking about the merit of this thing, but because you've asked the question that what some people in Pakistan think about the Indian ability to do these things. So I've just put it in front of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, sir.
There is a second question from Dr. Sarvajit Dudeja. Dr. Dudeja, over to you, please. Dr. Dudeja, your mic is on mute. Kindly unmute it. Dr. Sarvajit Dudeja, your mic is on mute. Kindly unmute, sir. Your question is for Ambassador Basit. Yeah, go ahead, sir. Uttam sir, is your audio now working?
Yeah. I've just reconnected. Can you hear me?
Yeah, better. You can go ahead now, sir.
Sorry for having missed Dr. Therija's point. But are we through with the questions now?
No, not really. Not really. There is a question from Mr. Karthik to Sanjay Gupta. In the meantime.
Yeah, Mr. Tikku, can I ask question?
Yeah.
Hello.
So we are working. Yeah.
Yeah, Sarvajit Dudeja. Can I ask you?
Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Ambassador Basit. Can you hear me? Ambassador Basit.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my question is about water war. Earlier, our Prime Minister Gujral used to say next war will be a water war. So do you think India, Pakistan is moving that direction?
Yes. It's a question which I guess everyone can respond to.
Yeah.
Maybe we can start from Mr. Pandya. Mr. Pandya.
Shall we ask Mr. Lodi to respond to it?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Hello. Yes.
Go ahead,
yeah, there was some distraction with me, so I could not really listen. But kindly, if you can repeat, I will be very happy to.
Dr. Sarvajit Dudeja, please repeat your question.
Yeah, Ambassador Basit, my question is about our Prime Minister Gujral used to say next war will be a water war. So do you think India and Pakistan move?
Thank you, Mr. Jadeja.
So the question is, Mr. Pandya, about water wars and the water war thesis.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. I mean, this again, looks a very good rhetorical or some kind of a propagandist sort of a alarmist kind of a thing, which is very popular in the world. But really speaking, we have no wars on water, and we cannot have wars on water because the kind of situation in which we have to operate, water can be managed only through cooperation. It cannot be managed through confrontation, because in case of confrontation, you do not have any kind of exclusivist kind of situations where it is like a territory, because water is a flowing resource, and it cannot be, there will not, I do not really perceive any kind of a situation where water will lead to a war. Land will definitely lead to a war. Some other resources will also definitely lead to a war, but not water.
That's a very good point. But water might not lead to war, but water is very territorial. And I think this is one of the lessons that we have drawn from the treaty itself, that two territories, water flowing between them, there are great potential for explosive relationship as much as there is potential for good cooperation.
That I agree. That I definitely agree, because we are seeing that not only in case of an international kind of situation, but even within the interstate area as well.
Yes.
So that I fully agree. But then the thing is that however much you kind of carry out a real good musical fighting,
absolutely correct.
Nothing comes out of it.
Yes.
Ultimately, nothing comes out of it. Your problems remain where they are.
Yes. Mr. Lodi, would you like to
Yes,
Closely
right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
There are two things. One is water war, and the other is war on water, war because of water. I think the wars have become so devastating, and they have become so counterproductive and so expensive, and so bad for the environment, that if any two nations go to war on water, they will, lose that small amount of water also that was existing before the war. So I think that would be a very naive idea, going to war, looking at, but employing water to put the other nation in some tight corner, that of course option stays with especially with the upper riparians. And if we believe in the human intellect, and if we believe that human beings with some cajoling can understand that our future is common, and especially in a subcontinent like ours, I mean, it is not possible that one corner of this subcontinent is totally, you can say, poverty-stricken and under a lot of stress, and the remaining continent enjoys. That is not possible. So if we understand that our future is common and we must strive for that, I don't think there would be any war on water between India and Pakistan. It shouldn't be like that.
That's a fair point, Mr. Lodi, but you would also concede the fact that you couldn't have had a better upper riparian country than India.
That I've said, I think, twice already. And I can say it the third time also.
Yes.
I mean, I have no complaints.
Yes.
There is a question from Madhav. Madhav, please, over to you.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
First of all, I would like to extend my thanks and congratulations to all the panelists for making this an extremely enlightening webinar. And it was really a new perspective on a lot of issues that are currently plaguing both countries in terms of the water treaty. So my question is open to all, but primarily I would like to ask this question to either General Gurmeet Singh sir or General Naeem Lodi sir. And my question is, how can the onset of diplomatic relations over the Indus Water Treaty occupy a crucial niche in defining a new precedent for a bilateral cooperative relationship between India and Pakistan? And also, more importantly, will the post-pandemic context of a possible resource scarcity exacerbate an already strained relationship between the two nations?
Thank you.
Okay, if I'm allowed to speak
yes, sir.
first.
Go ahead, sir.
As I already said in my presentation, that I'm of this opinion that this treaty actually underlines a fact that the two nations they have the capacity to resolve their issues if they take it seriously. And also they should try to ascertain the nature of issue. For example, in this case, it was ascertained by Mr. Black, the World Bank leader at that time, that it is a technical issue, and engineers were mainly employed to make all the clauses and all that, and it did work. So whatever is the nature of issue, we have a number of issues with us. So whatever is the nature of issue, if we take this as a baseline that we are capable of doing it. But I added one thing, and I would again repeat that, although many of my Indian brothers may not like it and may not contribute to that, we have never been able to resolve our issues bilaterally. Always there was a requirement of a third facilitator, even in this case of Indus Water Treaty. So I would suggest that please consider this, that if we really want our even smaller issues, although it will be very good if we do not employ any third party, and we can demonstrate that by, for example, resolving Siachen issue or the creek issue. But if we fail to do that, then we'll have to go back to this fact that it is such a deep-seated animosity and mistrust that we will always require a third party to do that. Of course, India being a bigger country, larger country, and a stronger country will always oppose that. But then what happens if there's a strong partner, one side is strong, the other side is comparatively weak, and they keep on negotiating for 70 years and nothing happens? Then what is the other option with us? So I think we should accept facilitations, if not arbitration, and that can resolve many issues. That is what I have learned from Indus Water Treaty. Thank you.
Gurmeet?
Firstly, I respect every point that General Lodhi sir has given. I totally agree with this. And basically, if we collectively must see, there is a requirement of peace and development between two nations. We have fought enough. We have had enough of differences. Now, time has come that both nations should start looking at the economy, development as a key point for our focus. At the same time, I'll be candid to say that the trust and terror cannot go together. There's no doubt about this. And when the issue is sovereignty, when the issue is territorial aspect, then don't expect a compromise on issues like Kashmir, POK, Gilgit, Baltistan, and on China-Pakistan economic corridor. See, technically, as we look at the treaty, I'm of this view, there's a requirement of reviewing it. There's a requirement of optimizing it. I've got a great respect for engineers, scientists who work so hard. It's not an easy thing. I salute their effort, what they've done. And I would say that, to be honest, if I have to say one word to General Lodhi sir, that you've been the defense secretary of the nation, strategic reversal of policy of terror and proxy is required. And in the last 60 years that I have lived, 60 years plus, I have honestly seen an anti-India, a hate India perspective, not from the people of Pakistan. Pakistani people are too good. In fact, I have visited Pakistan twice. I've got a deep respect for every Pakistani. And someone had invited me to Pakistan out of the panelists to say, thank you so much. I am totally, in fact, the warmth, the Punjabiyat of Pakistan is superb. But Pakistan Army, ISI, terrorist group, what they are doing is not acceptable. Sir, I would request intellects and seniors like you, please put the direction correctly. Who doesn't wish peace and development? Who doesn't wish that we share everything, sir? Nature's gift of water has got to be shared. Thank you so much.
If allowed, I will just say two sentences. One is that I think the hatred which soldiers have for war, nobody else can have it because we have to fight it.
Absolutely, sir.
Secondly, dear General, we have Kulbhushan Yadav with us. We have the recording of Major Gorev with us, who said that what they are doing in Balochistan. So I do not know what you are talking. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move Aditya.
Yeah. We have a question for Javed Majid.
Yes.
Sir, can you please comment on the Pakistan is claiming violation of treaty regarding 850 megawatt Ratle hydroelectric plant? India has not yet raised any violation of Article 2 of IWT by Pakistan through Pakistan is using groundwater for various uses in this basin of area of Ravi and Satluj before these rivers finally cross into the Pakistan. What damage can be faced by Pakistan?
I'm sorry, Aditya. I'm not. This is not my subject, so I can't answer this.
Right.
Maybe General Lodi can. General Lodi, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I think this issue is so recent. I'm also not very well conversant with it, and I'm again of the view that if there is a difference in interpretation of anything, we have the mechanism laid down in the treaty, and it has worked. It has worked not once; it has worked more than once. So let us resort to that mechanism. If there is any, I am not really aware of the details of this Ratali thing and what are the objections from Pakistan side and what are the Indians saying. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. We have a question for Ambassador Sharat Sabha. Ambassador Sabharwal, are you there? Ambassador Sabharwal.
I'm here.
Okay. Sir, issues would be as General Lodi said, issues would be resolved with third-party mediation only, whether you like or not. Sir, isn't that by bringing third-party, Pakistan is making every issue inflammable and a deteriorating situation? Over to you, sir.
No, I must say our position is well known, a position which I expressed when I was High Commissioner to Pakistan, which I continue to believe in, that we are capable of resolving our issues bilaterally. And it's not that when we have been talking bilaterally, we have not made no progress. A number of CBMs have been arrived at bilaterally, number of them, which have worked well. Then we had discussions, we went very far in addressing the issues of trade. And I think some very useful discussions were held during the period 2004 and 7, etc., etc. Then bilaterally efforts continued even in 2014 and 15 to somehow resume the dialogue. And I think the decision was made, if I remember correctly, towards the end of 2015 to resume bilateral dialogue. Then it was put paid to by a series of terror attacks which took place. So to say that bilateralism, my audience has asked me this question very often in Pakistan, and I said we don't even have a language problem, so why can't we talk bilaterally? The other thing is, and I must say must emphasize this, any third party will be involved, will first serve its own interests before serving the interests of India and Pakistan. Just to give you an example, I remember when 95 to 99, I was Deputy High Commissioner in Pakistan. There was a very strong push to say that we should involve the United States. I'm just taking an example. I'm not talking of a particular country. It can be any third party. Very strong push that we should somehow involve United States to resolve our issues. When I went back as High Commissioner in 2009, people were telling me, look, United States, we have had a lot of difficulties with them. Why are you developing your relationship with them, etc., etc. The sentiment had completely changed. So a third party which is acceptable one day may not be acceptable another day, etc., etc. And that's because of the simple fact with any third party. I'm not talking, I just mentioned a country because to give you an example, but any third party which you take will first serve its own interest before serving the interests of the two countries. And I emphasize that by talking bilaterally, we have made progress. But I think this dimension of violence, etc., which I mentioned earlier, has to end. And if that happens, then we can move forward in resolving the issues.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have a last question from Mr. Joshi. Over to you, Mr. Joshi.
No, it's not a question, it was a small comment, because when General Lodi said that we have to per se go to a third party, I would just like to remind him that many of our projects, including UDI 2 and Chutak and Basgo, they were solved bilaterally. We didn't go to any third party. You agreed to our assertions and the projects were built and they are functioning very nicely. So it's not always the case that we have to go to a third party. Thank you.
Uttam sir, over to you.
Well, I think we've had a wonderful discussion and a very long discussion on a topic which will always involve India and Pakistan. We've looked at 60 years. We now need to look at the next 50 years and see how things are going to move forward. But history is always very intriguing. And I will just end by saying one thing. When the negotiations was happening, India, in order to claim some of its rights on the western rivers, had conceded to the permanent Indus Commission, only on the ground that there won't be a third-party neutral commissioner. So the emphasis was entirely at a bilateral way of dealing with the difficulties, dealing with the problems that might emerge. So I think this whole idea of Pakistan insisting on a third party soon came about after partition. In fact, the entire canal dispute, the emphasis of Pakistan was on a third-party international court of justice. And India always relied upon the mechanism of bilateral treaty. So I think this narrative will continue to involve India and Pakistan. But we need to also look at the larger narrative of managing the water between India and Pakistan. And that, I think, is the future, which we have to consider very strongly. So I thank everyone for coming for this webinar, across the border and within India itself. It's been very enriching. And I think, Aditya, you should continue to have a couple of more sessions with more micro details and ways to go about it. So that will be very useful. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Thank you.
It was a pleasure, sir.
We can take the last comments, just 10 seconds each, and then we can close it.
Right.
Right. So we can start with Javed Majid, please.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was extremely valuable session for me, listening to views from across the border. And my focus again is on the future and on the fate of our people of both countries. We have very, very serious problems ahead of us. And I think instead of fighting each other, we should be trying to best to resolve those problems. 700 million on your side, about 15, 20 million people on our side, growing. They'll probably double in the next 30 or 40 years. And then this corona affliction, it's not going away. It's had a serious effect on the whole globe. We may develop a vaccine by next December, but come next year, there'll probably be another mutation of this. So we are in serious trouble. China has come out of it, but where do they sell their goods? The whole world is closed up. So I think instead of war, I think we should think of development, mutual cooperation, how to resolve our people's fate for the future. Thank you.
Mr. Pandya?
Thank you. Well, we have to really take one thing at a time, because the issues are so complex and so wide that if we try to take all the issues in one go, naturally we will have a problem. And Indus Treaty actually presents us with a very good opportunity to have a joint developmental mechanism in which we should be able to share our knowledge, we should be able to share our expertise with each other, and then carry out the developmental work further, especially the irrigation and agriculture, because the irrigated agriculture is the cornerstone of economic prosperity of any country, and especially the poverty affected countries like India and Pakistan. The key issue of development will always come from the rural poverty alleviation, and that rural poverty alleviation will come through irrigated agriculture. So we need to really work hard on these aspects in a joint manner, and that is the one which will solve a lot of problems otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Maybe General Gurmeet Singh can come in.
Thank you so much. As last words, I would like to say that I think we need to be positive, we need to share, we need to help. There's no doubt about this. We must move ahead. But this treaty cannot be seen in isolation, unconnected to reality and environment. My request to Pakistani friends on the panel is that Pakistan must stop terror and proxy. There are so many areas that we can be positive, can be helpful, but it can never happen when terror and proxy center of gravity is with Pakistan Army and ISI. Thank you.
General Lodi.
Thank you very much. First of all, I really enjoyed it, and everybody, I think, needs to be appreciated for that. The attitude of 70 years will not go in 70 days, but the first step has to be taken. We have to stop digging at each other. And I think good human beings, they always respond to logic. And I believe that on both sides of this divide, good human beings are residing. So if we take the first step, I'm quite sure that things will improve. As far as the finger pointing about terrorism and all that is concerned, I alluded it in my presentation also. Let me say it again. There are many parts in this world which do not want us to get together. Please keep that thing in mind. So once I say that you are doing this to me, and you say that I'm doing this to you, please reevaluate that who is feeding you and who is feeding me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General. Mr. D.V. Thareja. D.V. Thareja.
Yeah, can I say out now?
Yeah.
General Lodi said that if you operate your reservoirs in such a way that we can be put to a loss, like we can be deprived of the water when we crucially need it. Can Pakistan present this as a form of a study and then come up with how should we operate so that Pakistan is not harmed? I can assure you that these are all statements which can be useful for the masses to excite them. But when it comes to technically, there is no way that India can operate there. Once we develop the entire reservoirs, the kind of a volume holding of each reservoir and the sequence of their operations, you have to imagine that in our country, we have each project owned by some other organization. So there will not be a possibility that we can operate these reservoirs in such a way that deprive Pakistan. So please send us that study so that we get benefited, and we can assure you that we can work together, that thing does not happen. Coming to the use of neutral expert or the International Court of Justice, they are a big drain of money. It is true that I came to know that you spent almost 100 crores when the issue was posed, Baglayar issue was posed. Fortunately, in India, we were all Indian experts. You had engaged number of legal and experts from outside. But please make sure that whatever learning we have had so far, that can be applied usefully, and there is absolutely no need to go to any third-party intervention. We are very capable, both the engineering groups of each of the countries and the diplomats and the social groups. So it's a question of resolving that we are very capable in ourselves. And I am very, very clear that the rivers are supposed to create that bondage, and the day is not far off that through this Indus basin itself, Indus river system itself, will be bonded together again as a unit of development. And my best wishes for this. And Tiku has done a great job in putting us all together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Ambassador Sabharwal, please.
Thank you. I think it's been a very useful discussion, perspective from both sides. I was very glad to hear from our panelists from Pakistan that they feel that this treaty has worked well. That's not the sentiment I heard, I must say, a few years ago when I was in Pakistan, when there was a very, very sort of concerted campaign to say that everything was wrong with the manner in which the treaty was being implemented, etc., that India was diverting water. But so long as there is a realization that India has adhered to its part of the deal, I think that's one positive step forward. As I said earlier, in my personal view, this treaty has worked well. It should continue to guide sharing of waters between the two countries. But as I emphasized earlier, I think no treaty can work perfectly unless there is a degree of trust between the two parties. That's been an issue between India and Pakistan. India, I must say, has not lagged behind in trying to bridge that trust. I myself lived through a phase when we tried to address various issues. But I think there are concerns here, and there needs to be a lot of introspection in Pakistan on why those trust issues are arising. And I would leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sabharwal. I would request now Chair to just take around 20-25 seconds, and then I can close the call. Thank you.
No, nothing else to say. I think you left Sanjay out. Sanjay?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sanjay Gupta, please. Sorry. My mistake, please.
Thank you. Just to say that I think for too long the discussions on Indus, all the discourse has actually been taking place between state actors. I mean, nothing wrong with that. But I think we really need to involve a lot of other stakeholders whom it impacts a lot more. Farmer groups, I think the media, which can be even much more nationalistic than the biggest nationalists themselves, and a lot of discussion that takes place is based on perceptions. It's not really based on reality. So I think we need to broaden the discourse to include more stakeholders to make it much more informed, and perhaps we might see a more productive, a more positive approach going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. But just to say thank you all very much. It's been wonderful having you all together. Plenty of water has flowed, so to say, and we'll continue this discussion in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. It was indeed an excellent discussion today. Each speakers expressed their views and perspectives on the water treaty and the future scenarios ahead of us. I would like to thank all the speakers and the Honorable Chair for making the discussion live and vibrant. This webinar was organized under this webinar series of GCTC Manthan, under which we had several webinars on various important issues. We look forward to connect with everyone soon with another important issue of discussion. And thank you once again to our fellow participants from Pakistan. Thank you once.